I'm on the board.
I have some announcements to make for you folks in the audience, but also to inform our candidates. And we want to get started saying thank you so much to all of you who have been willing to come and be with us together for what we think is a very important step in the democratic process, and that is getting educated about candidates. As you know, this is the gubernatorial primary candidates from the Libertarian and the Democrat parties. We thank you all for coming to the forum, and in particular thanks to our candidates for their participation. The rules for lead forums are as follows. Campaign literature is not to be distributed within Ballentyne Auditorium. The audience is to refrain from applauding or responding verbally during the forum. You will have an opportunity to applaud at the conclusion of the forum. And please remember to turn off your cell phones right now. Thank you. When the forum begins, each candidate will give a 2-minute opening statement. At the end, they will make 2-minute closing statements. During the forum, each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question posed to them. They will be reminded of their remaining time by a league member who is holding the cards. And if necessary, there is a bell that will be rung every 2 minutes, and then you are executed, so you don't want that. The audience is encouraged to submit written questions on the slips of paper that are being distributed and collected by league members. So just raise your hand, and they will come around and hand you out a slip to fill out or pick up your questions. The questions will be given to our league screeners who are down here, who will eliminate duplications and combine similar questions before handing them on to me. The event is being live streamed on Facebook, and viewers will include those attending watch parties hosted at various local leagues throughout the state. So, just a moment, we will get started. Good morning. I am Mary Ray Bragg, and I have the honor of being the president of the Iowa League of Women Voters. And this is the first ever live-streamed League of Women Voters Forum featuring candidates running in an Iowa gubernatorial primary. Welcome to you and to those who are in the audience this morning at Ballentyne Auditorium here on the campus of Kirkwood Community College in Cedar Rapids. This event is a project of the League of Women Voters, locals in Lynn County and Johnson County, to whom we are deeply indebted. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, nonprofit political organization which neither supports nor opposes any candidate or political party. It works to expand citizen participation in government, and membership is open to any person 16 years of age and older. Today's forum panel is comprised of 6 persons running in the June 5th primary to become the Democrat Party's candidate for governor, and the two people running to become the Libertarian Party candidate. There will not be a primary race in the Republican Party, as incumbent Governor Kim Reynolds is unchallenged on the Republican ballot. Democrat panelists are Nate Bolton, Kathy Glasson, Fred Hubble, Andy McGuire, John Norris, and Ross Wilburn. Libertarian candidates are Marco Battaglia and Jake Porter. Questions posed to the candidates will be submitted in writing by members of the audience and may also be submitted by going to the League of Women Voters, LWV, Lynn County Facebook page. Candidates have 2 minutes for each response, and we will rotate the order of response among each party's candidates. Now let's get started with opening statements. We will begin with our Democrat candidates, and we open with Nate Bolton.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the League of Women Voters who are hosting this forum. One of the most important parts of our campaign is to make sure we are discussing issues in a substantive way, and we really appreciate the fact that you have provided this forum to allow voters to directly get their questions submitted and answered by candidates. My name is Nate Bolton. I'm the state senator who represents East Des Moines and Pleasant Hill in the Iowa Senate. I grew up just south of here in Columbus Junction, a town of about 2,000 people in Louisa County. In fact, my mom and stepfather still live on a heritage farm just outside of Columbus Junction. I'm a product of that rural education and upbringing. I grew up in a proud union home. My dad came out of Band-Aid Tire Plant in Muscatine. In fact, my grandfather spent 20 years at the Columbus Junction Rath Packing House as the chief union steward there. For 12 years, I've been a workers' rights attorney, continuing that work and that family tradition of standing up for workplace rights. When I ran for the Iowa Senate 2 years ago, it was with the idea of making sure we do all we can in this state to protect and promote a quality of life for workers in this state that we can be proud of. Instead, we saw missed opportunities taken by Branston and Reynolds as they had one-party control of the state government. Think of the things our state could have done over the last 2 years to make our state a better place, to make our state a more welcoming state, to make a state that is reflecting of our values as opposed to focused on partisan political attacks and score settling. The opportunities that were missed by this administration are the things that we value most as Iowans. Making sure that we have a quality education system that delivers on the promise of making Iowa an education leader again. Making sure our soil and water not only feed the world, but provide safe drinking water and recreational opportunities in our state. Make sure every Iowan has access to quality health care in his or her communities, including mental health care. And making sure our economy is not based on how many coupons we can hand out to corporations, but the skilled, productive workforce we need for tomorrow. Thank you.
No, again, please, no applause. Thank you. Ms. Glass.
Great. Good morning, and thank you, League of Women Voters of Iowa, for hosting us. My name is Kathy Glosson, and I'm an intensive care nurse and have been a union leader and organizer over 20 years in that experience. And I'm also proud to be a Democratic candidate for governor. But I do want to cut right to the chase, because our Bold Progressive campaign is all about doing politics differently. Because status quo policies and politics isn't getting the job done in Iowa. That's why we're building a bold progressive movement across the state of Iowa. And Iowans are ready for big, bold ideas to turn this state around. They're ready to rise up to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And we need to get there fast, because folks that are struggling to put gas in the car or pay their rent can't afford to wait any longer. And they're ready to rise up for expanded and strengthened union rights. We need a governor who's going to lead on standing up to corporations and making sure that workers can have a voice on the job by forming a union. And the governor needs to lead on that. And we need to fight. And Iowans are ready for universal health care for all, including reproductive and mental health services. Clean water. We need to hold corporate agribusiness accountable for the pollution they cause, and fully fund public education and making college affordable for our students. We're building a grassroots movement in each county in the state of Iowa, because when we invest in these bold ideas, We can improve the lives of over 1 million Iowans. I invite you all to join our movement. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hubble.
Thank you. I want to first thank all of you for taking time out of your day to be here today. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for helping to organize and host this event. And I want to thank Kirkwood Community College for making your facilities available for all of us to be here. It wasn't much more than a month ago, I visited the hotel Kirkwood manages just down the street from here and saw all the wonderful training programs that take place in that hotel for students to learn how to get into the hotel industry and management practices. That's the kind of job training we need all across Iowa. My name is Fred Hubble, a fifth-generation Iowan, lifelong progressive Democrat. And my wife and I have worked for over 30 years in this state, helping to build the values and the quality of life that have made Iowa such a special place. I've served as chair of the Planned Parenthood Board. I've served on the board of directors of Simpson College, the Iowa College Foundation, and the University of Iowa Business School Advisory Board just down the road, helping expand access for more people to get higher education in our state. But I also chaired the board for the Iowa Power Fund, helping Iowa move forward with renewable energy and renewable fuel investments to maintain our position as a leader in those areas. Year after year, we see Governor Reynolds and Republican legislatures' misguided priorities and terrible fiscal mismanagement, causing lack of funding for health care, lack of funding for education, lack of funding for job training in our state. They stripped collective bargaining rights. They defunded Planned Parenthood, privatized Medicaid. All of this happened in the last session. And at the end of that session, Governor Reynolds said this was the best legislative session we've ever had. And to me, it was the worst legislative session we've ever had. And that's why I'm running for governor, because if we don't change it, we're going to be Kansas pretty quickly. We need a governor who's got to demonstrate leadership skills and experience to turn this state around, stop the fiscal mismanagement, and invest in the priorities, education and health care that Iowans need to reach their potential. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Ms. McGuire.
Well, thank you. I want to thank you all for being here as well in the League of Women Voters. You know, we can listen to you. That's what we're supposed to do as governors, as governor candidates, and as governor, and so I applaud you for being here. I'm Amy McGuire. I'm running for governor. I'm from just up the road here in Waterloo. That's where I was born and raised. A family of 8. My dad was a World War II vet, came home and started a construction machinery business. My mom stayed home with us. And the reason I tell people that is because it was about caring when I was growing up. And I bet a lot of you as well. You know, caring about our neighbor, caring about if someone was sick or injured, we helped them out. That's why I became a medical doctor, because I could see the power of caring about someone else, especially when they're sick or injured. But I've been to all 99 counties, and I'll tell you, people don't feel like their government cares about them anymore. They don't feel like they're getting a fair shake or they can get ahead for their families. And honestly, they feel like the Reynolds administration has put profits ahead of people. Well, I will never do that. I want to be your governor so I can put people first. I took an oath as a doctor to put patients first, and I will always put people first. What I hear a lot about as I'm going around this state is I hear about health care. And as a doctor, health care is a right, not a privilege, and we should always remember that as Democrats. Also, this Medicaid mess that's affecting 600,000 of our citizens, we have got to bring that back into the state, and as someone who's been in health care my whole life, I can do that because the stories are horrendous and we have to help the people who are on Medicaid. I also hear a lot about the mental health crisis. I have a mental health plan on my website to try to take care of people who are having struggles with mental health, substance abuse, and addiction. I've always been a lifelong supporter of women's health and would fund Planned Parenthood fully. And I've also talked a lot about public education. I hope there's some teachers in our audience. I respect and love our teachers, and I want to make sure they get the resources they need. And lastly, since it's Earth Day tomorrow, I'm a scientist, so I talk a lot about climate change and bringing science back to your government. So I love to hear your questions today, and thank you again for all being here.
Thank you. Mr. Norris.
Thank you very much to the League of Women Voters for putting this together. We've always had a great tradition of advancing democracy and conversation, so I appreciate that, and all of you for attending. My name is John Norris. I'm a farm kid from southwest Iowa. I grew up on my family farm. I've been in the restaurant business. I was chief of staff together at Vilsack. I was chairman of our Iowa Utilities Board. Served in the Obama administration as chief of staff of the U.S. Department of Agriculture and Energy Commissioner, advancing the cause against climate change with renewable energy. I was your representative to the United Nations for agricultural policy. As as I look at what's happening in Iowa today, what motivates me to be in this race for governor, really reflects back to those values I grew up with in that family farm. It's that love for the land, respect for our natural environment, communities and caring for each other, and that fundamental belief that public education is the great equal opportunity provider for all our citizens. What's happening in government today is so estranged from those values that I find dear to Iowa and who I think we are. And you can see a lot of it because of the special interest control of our government today. I believe this election is ultimately about contesting for power against the wealthy, the special interests, and the corporate lobbyists who run our government today. We need our government to work for people. Look at the privatization of Medicaid. That was corporate lobbyists getting in the back door of the Branstad Reynolds administration, looking to make a profit off our Medicaid resources while denying services for health care for our most vulnerable Iowans. Look at the denial of our water quality problem because of corporate lobbyists controlling this governor. Look at our refusal to address gun violence. And it's the corporate lobby of the gun manufacturers that run our policies with this governor and this legislature. So we've got to reclaim our democracy as one that works for people. I share those same values you do. I believe I can put my experience to work to help turn this state around. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now Mr. Wilburn.
Hello everyone, my name is Ross Wilburn and I'm a Democrat running for governor. I'm the former mayor of Iowa City and served on city council for 12 years there, so I know what it's like to take a controversial vote like enacting a local smoking ban before the state ban and then having to face your neighbors the next day in the grocery store or the barber shop. This guy had hair back then. But I also ran the crisis center of Johnson County. I'm a former social worker, so I work with volunteers from young to the very old to provide services and support for our neighbors, which Neighbors Helping Neighbors is part of what our Let's Be Iowa campaign is about. I had the good fortune last night to attend the Borough Land Trust, their 40th anniversary. And a word that kept coming up there was legacy. And the legacy that they put into place in preserving some of our natural areas. They held it at True Blood Lake in Iowa City, which was another effort that we did when I was on that city council to preserve that sand quarry, that lake, and land. I think legacy is a hallmark of the League of Women Voters in terms of empowering voters and protecting democracy. And in many ways, this election is about legacy. We've been known for education, and efforts have been made to attack that. We've been known for our workers. My father was a United Auto worker before he died, and the legacy that he left in terms of the benefits and his pension that helped me make sure that everything was taken care of and I didn't have to pull a dime out of my pocket when we had to bury it. It is about legacy. It's about welcoming people to Iowa, whether you have citizenship or not, whether you're part of the LGBTQ plus community or not, whether you're a person of color or not, a senior, if you're from a rural area and feel that government has forgotten you. That's what this is all about. I look forward to your questions so we can continue to build upon the legacy that has been destroyed by our current governor. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we will have our two candidates for the Libertarian Party. We will begin with Mr. Battaglia.
Thank you. It's Marco Battaglia. Thank you very much. And I want to thank the League of Women Voters for having us and for all that they do for the state and local and the nation. It is actually, they've been fighting for our party and our candidates to be included as long as we've both been around. And that included the first woman to ever get an electoral vote for president was Tony Nathan for our party, and the League of Women Voters have been invaluable in terms of fostering debate between all candidates running. My mother grew up, actually came over to the United States on a boat from Italy, and my father grew up on a farm in Minnesota. And I talk to people a lot for a living. I'm a journalist and a media major. So if you haven't heard of the two of us on the end here very much, it's in no part due to the work League of Women Voters is doing. There's definitely other factors at play there. But also people hear my voice and they're like, oh, you're Italian, your mom came from Italy. And I know it's kind of confusing because I grew up in Iowa and sound more like Brad Pitt when he tries to speak Italian, so buongiorno. But I've been in union jobs, and I have been a warehouse worker before I became a media major. So I definitely understand those struggles from a worker level. I actually see problems with a minimum wage at $7 an hour. I think maybe that's the only reason that we're paying people $7 an hour is because there's a law that says you can get away with that. No one can live off that. I have a running mate I just introduced named Farrika Robertson, and I want you to get a chance to hear her talk. We actually both went to Hoover High School. She's amazing, and we'll get into more detail here, but also if you ever get a chance to hear her sing, do yourself a favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Porter.
I want to thank the League of Women Voters for having us, and also thank everyone for coming out here and doing your civic responsibility and taking it serious. So a little bit about me. My name is Jake Porter. I am running as a Libertarian. I am a business consultant over in Council Bluffs, so had a little drive in this morning. I ran for Secretary of State back in 2010 and 2014. So right now the Libertarian Party has become a major party. It's the first time in the 45-year plus history of the Libertarian Party of Iowa that we are a major party. So we're included in a lot more things than we were before. We also get access to have a primary on June 5th, just like the Democrats and Republicans. So that is very exciting for us. We're a growing party. I've joined the party back around 2004, 2005. We started out, people didn't know what a libertarian was. They thought vegetarians, librarians, thought the librarians had a political party. But it turns out that we've grown a lot more people are hearing it about us, and things like this are definitely helping. One of the things that I did want to talk about is kind of address what a libertarian is. Libertarians, without getting into too much detail, we believe that people should be free to live their lives as they see fit, so long as you're not harming anyone else. I often say that we take the good from the Democrats and the good from the Republicans and we just toss out the bad. We believe in maximum personal and economic freedoms, while Democrats tend to believe in more personal freedoms but fewer economic freedoms, and Republicans tend to believe in more economic freedoms but fewer personal freedoms. So I'd like to think that we take that and we bring both the good from both parties, and we kind of run on issues that a lot of people agree with and a lot of issues that are being ignored right now in the state of Iowa. So thanks very much for having us, and thanks everyone for turning out today.
Thank you. And I would like to remind our candidates that the microphone is your friend, but only if you're very close to it and you talk really loud into it. We don't want to miss a word you say, so please remember that. Our first question of the many that we're getting already for our candidates today has to do with, no surprise, education. And the questions range from what do you think of the educational savings accounts to how are you going to support our colleges and our community colleges. And I think you can just kind of go from there. And we will start with our Democratic candidates, and we will begin with Ms. Glassen.
Great, thank you. I came out in this campaign early talking about public education, how we have starved public education over the last several administrations in the state of Iowa, and we've demonized teachers in this state. I believe we need to fully fund K-12 education, and I support a 6% increase in K-12 funding over the current budget levels. And as governor, I will veto anything less than 4% for K-12 funding. And I say 4% because that's what Iowa used to invest in our children and our teachers to get to the top-notch quality education that we provide here in our state. I believe every public school in the state of Iowa should be the best public schools. And every teacher and child in this state needs the resources no matter where they live or where they attend school. I also support free community college tuition for students that may not want to attend a 4-year public university, so that they can get the skills and trades they need to actually fill the jobs that we are trying to fill and find people to take those positions right now, and they have the skills to enter the workforce. And then for our 4-year universities, I've called for a freeze on tuition on each of our public universities because tuition is too high for our students attending our public universities. I believe in co-governing, a governor that has experts at her side, and that includes on higher education. And my goal will be working with higher ed experts and experts in education with the ultimate goal of ensuring that every undergraduate in-state student that attends our public universities graduates debt-free. And that's good for all of us as Iowans to build the workforce and highly educated workforce of the future.
Thank you. And next is Mr. Hubble.
Thank you. As I said before, I've worked on for over 30 years in the educational elements of our state. Simpson College Board for over 30 years, University of Iowa Business School Board, Iowa College Foundation Board, helping make education more accessible and affordable for students all across the state. And my wife and I have sponsored numerous scholarships to help young people who can't afford to go to school get a scholarship to be able to go to college. One of my top priorities that every day I talk about on this campaign is making sure every Iowan has access to lifelong quality learning. For me, that starts with fully funding all-day pre-K. We need to make sure every child in our state has the opportunity to get started in the right way. And we need to fully fund our K-12 public schools. But we need to support that funding with the commitment and the goal that we want to be the best in the country again, like we used to be. We used to be number 1 or number 2 recognized all across the country of having the best educational system. Most recent reports give us a C. That's not acceptable. It's hard on people, and it's hard to grow our state that way. I also want to make college affordable. If we manage our fiscal budget better, and we have education as a priority, we can give the regions and the community colleges the money that they need to run their organizations successfully and not have to raise tuition so much, so we can keep student debt from climbing as fast as it is. But job training is just as important. Every high school child in our state needs an opportunity to be able to access job training for a skill or for a trade starting their junior year in high school. They need to know that there's an alternative to a 4-year school. Either one is a great path to have a wonderful opportunity to be successful in their lives. And I want to make sure that job training is coordinated with local businesses, local community colleges, and training facilities by the unions, so that we can actually educate and train the people all across our state to fill the jobs that's so desperately needed for them to reach their potential and for our economy to grow the way it should. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. McGuire.
Well, I think public education is how, I'm going to guess, all of us became successful. And we have to have a world-class public education. As a doctor, I will tell you there was a 10th grade teacher who told me I was good at math and science. And some of the women in the audience will know they didn't tell women my age that we were good at math and science. But he told me that, and he told me I should be a doctor. I've never even seen a woman doctor. It never would have occurred to me to be a woman doctor, to be a doctor. But he pushed me and motivated me and made me more than I ever thought I could be. And now I'm a doctor. That's what teachers do. That, and they stand in the door at a Parkland shooting and make sure their students are safe, even risking their own lives and losing their own lives. We have got to respect our teachers and give them the resources they need to teach our kids. Now that starts with early childhood education. We need to make sure that every child is ready to learn, and when they enter kindergarten, it's very important for the rest of their lives that they're ready to learn. We've also got to make sure we fund our K through 12. And we have been underfunding this for years. We averaged over 4% from 1973 until 8 years ago. Averaged, even in the hard years. And we are averaging less than 2% in this last 8 years, honestly getting closer to 1%. That's not making schools a priority, and I will make schools a priority. Then we've got to talk about college, regents, community college, apprenticeships. We've got to make sure we have the options for every child to be successful in this state. That's how we're going to become the state we want to be. And so I believe very strongly that we have to make public education from preschool through K through 12, through community college, regents, universities, and apprenticeships, so that everybody in this state can have the ability to be the success they can be. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Norris.
Well, the vouchers and the ESAs are what I was talking about fracturing communities and that sense of caring. Those just fracture our support for public education, particularly in rural communities where there's no option. And you're removing people from our public education system, draining resources, and creating a two-tiered class system of education in this state. That's bad for Iowa. It's a funding issue. We've gone on a tax cut spree for special interests that's eroded our fiscal capacity to invest in public education. True critical pieces of data we should inform ourselves of about our agenda going forward. Free and reduced lunch has doubled in our schools in the last 15 years. Nearly half the babies born in Iowa today are born eligible for Medicaid, born into poverty. Now, if you're that classroom teacher, who's the bedrock of our public education system, and half your students are arriving every day either food insecure or from a single-parent home working 60 hours because of our low wages, or a substance abuse home or a domestic violence home, we are not equipping that teacher with the resources to succeed. That's our future. The number of new English language learners we have coming into our schools, which is critical and important for the diversity in our state and our workforce and rebuilding communities, that's another set of challenges for our teachers. And then layer upon that, we have no children's mental health system in the state of Iowa. We know 1 in 5 children will have some form of mental illness. We're doing nothing to address the needs of those children. We have got to invest in our future. Get away from these unlimited tax cuts to special interests. Invest in public education. Invest in training, community college, apprenticeship programs, and bring down the cost of tuition so those children who want to go on to college have the opportunity to, and not be burdened with lifetime of debt that hampers their ability to start a family, buy a home, start a business, and invest in their future in Iowa. This is so critical for our future, and this governor and this legislature are failing us with moves like vouchers and ESAs.
Thank you. Mr. Wilbur.
Educating our children and Iowans for life, a legacy question. I've had the opportunity to observe education not only from the outside, but participate from the inside as a student when I grew up in the Davenport public school system, as a parent of 2 children, they're now adult children, as the director of a nonprofit and a youth counselor, working with teachers and parents to make sure that young people had their mental health issues were addressed so that they arrived at school ready to learn, and making sure that school was a safe place for teaching and learning. Also as a partner and giving opportunities for young people to contribute back to their community as director of the Crisis Center, when they would have food drives and gather over 20 tons of food for their neighbors and some of their peers. So how will your child become a doctor if they don't have that special relationship with their teacher? How will they be the first in their family to go to college if we're not foregoing the resources by giving away those big tax breaks and investing in our young people? So let's be Iowa. Let's support, fully fund education. Let's support that pre-K education, making sure that education is our #1 priority. Let's work with our teachers and make sure that we are teaching and measuring for growth and not teaching towards tests. Let's restore collective bargaining rights for our teachers so that we can show them the respect and make sure that we're keeping high-quality teachers both in rural and urban areas. We've got to use public dollars for public education. We've got to make education and respect it as the profession that it is, so that we can continue that legacy and that generational supports for all Iowans.
Thank you. And Mr. Bolton, please.
Thank you for the question. We are a state that has always considered ourselves a leader in education, a state where every child knows that as they grow up, they're going to reach their full potential through an Iowa-based education system, start to finish. That's been an Iowa education value. And yet we're in a system right now where we've seen education slip as a priority over and over again. I actually went to Simpson College to be a high school government and history teacher. A student taught at Indianola High School, and yes, I got the coaching endorsement, so I was serious about teaching social studies. But something that we've seen is a systemic problem in Iowa right now. We've gone 8 years underfunding our public schools against the rate of inflation, and now the Republican legislature has decided that 8 years of cutting has resulted in a need to run with education savings accounts, new versions of school vouchers. We're not going to make our state's future brighter. No state has ever made its future brighter by compromising on the education of our children. We have to get serious about the challenges our education system faces right now. One of them is funding as a priority our public schools, our community colleges, and our state universities that have seen cuts over and over again. In fact, we're losing dozens of employees here at Kirkwood as a result of their mid-year reckless budget cuts. When we get serious about making sure that next generation of qualified teachers comes into our classrooms, I resisted that public sector bargain bill that told every 22-year-old graduating with a teaching license that they will never see a wage increase that keeps up with inflation, have less and less of a voice in their health insurance, all while their student debt loads have increased and increased. We made it so our next generation of teachers will have to struggle with the decision whether they can even afford to practice in their profession in this state. As governor, I will change those priorities. I will make sure we again recruit the best and brightest to come into our classrooms, that when they get in those classrooms, they're funded adequately, they have the resources they need to succeed, and our whole education from start to finish is successful.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Porter.
Education is very important. Now, I'm not a teacher, never been a school teacher, but I understand that it's important, and so I've decided upon a running mate, should I win the primary on June 5th, and that is Lynn Gentry, who is a retired public school teacher. And one thing, so if I say anything that she doesn't like, she's going to let me know about it, that's for sure. But education is very important. We used to be the top in the nation. Now we're somewhere in the middle of the pack. Middle is not good enough, and we're declining. We have to look at a few things that have happened here as a precinct. A lot of it has to do with the budget crisis that has occurred in the past couple of years. What we see with the budget crisis is that these cuts are being made mid-year, which makes it very difficult. You don't know if your funding is going to get cut until later on throughout the year when the legislature decides, or the governor's office, that they don't have enough money. They don't have money to pay tax refunds right now on time, and so they end up making cuts. Whenever they do this, it creates disastrous consequences. We've also got to look at changing the way we do things, using more technology. And as we look through the budget, cutting things in the education budget that has nothing to do with education. We should let teachers teach. We shouldn't trust the bureaucrats or someone because they've got a title like governor next to their name, but they know what is important for education. We need to get back to letting teachers teach. We need to make sure that we've got a budget that is realistic, that doesn't cause mid-year budget cuts. And by doing those things, I think we'll start to really improve education again.
Thank you. Mr. Battaglia.
I went to the University of Northern Iowa, was a media major there, and I'm actually going back through Blackhawk County tomorrow and meeting with some of my old teachers and people on campus. And just the other day, I met with some of my old teachers from Hoover High School and Central Campus and Academy in Des Moines. And one was great to see my old Italian teacher, Mr. Giovanni Leo. But I feel I'm still really in touch with what they're dealing with on the front line. And I have a son that's in public school, so what they're dealing with on the front line. I actually have a special education teacher from Woodward Granger on my team, so we're really trying to make education a priority. And I believe that Iowans should be able to set their own high bar in terms of education standards. State and local government should be able to lead the way on raising standards, measuring and supporting teacher and leader effectiveness, reevaluating the skills that children are taught, and closing achievement gaps. Through collaborative efforts between Democrats, Republicans, and the federal government, right now we have, in this very important worldwide job economy, we have all students in 30 nations and provinces that are more likely to be advanced in math than just students in Iowa. And we have assessments that are below the national average. And the thought that these kids are going to be competing with the brightest minds from all over the world, we need to change things immediately. And I also want to address this idea that libertarians will just cut spending. I believe my plan, me and Farrah Robertson, will actually bring in more revenue, put more money through, more intelligent money through to education, and we don't believe in pitting homeschooling, private schooling, and public education against each other. We want all of these to be viable options, and we want to support all three.
Thank you. Our next question, and I have many of them on this subject, has to do with gun safety. And it has to do with how do we bring together, how do we find common ground, how do we ensure the safety of our citizens, of course, in particular our children. We will begin answering this question with Mr. Hubbell.
Thank you. You know, first of all, I want to applaud the students from all across the country, in Iowa, but also the rest of our country and in D.C., who are raising this issue and getting a lot more attention for it than unfortunately a lot of us in other generations have been unable to do. We need to give them the support that they need, and we need to keep encouraging that kind of activity. You know, this is an area where there's opinions on both sides of where to draw the line between public safety and gun safety. And unfortunately, when our governor was asked about this topic, she said, we have reasonable gun laws in Iowa, and it's really a federal issue, not a state issue. And we all know that last year the Republican legislature and the governor signed quite a few new laws affecting gun safety and public safety in our state. And they introduced many more this year, and there's still one in our legislature dealing with maybe changing our Constitution around this topic. So my suggestion is we need to have a serious, open, transparent conversation about gun safety and public safety in our state, because we're not having it. The governor is unwilling to have the conversation. The legislature is unwilling to have the conversation. And part of the reason is groups like the NRA, outside groups, outside special interests, scaring people in our state away from having this conversation. And that's why I have signed the pledge not to take any funding in my campaign from the NRA, because I don't want to have that influence in our state. This is an Iowa discussion and an Iowa topic that we need to come to together. And I would encourage everybody up here to sign that pledge. It's important that we come together and discuss these issues, because where does public safety start and stop? Where do gun rights start and stop? There's people on both sides of this topic, and rightly so. So let's have a conversation, and let's decide as Iowans where we want to draw that line. Where do we want to say public safety is more important than gun safety, or vice versa? Let's have that transparent, open discussion, and then get some results for Iowans. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McGuire.
Thank you. Yesterday, we were with a group of students at the Capitol, and it was so exciting to see the passion that they had for making sure that they were safe. You know, when I think about guns, I will tell you, if I was on an acreage, I'd want to have a shotgun. And I have hunters in my family, and that is not what this is about. This is about the rights of all of us to be safe. The rights of those kids to be safe when they're in school. The rights of you to be safe when you're in this theater, in a movie theater. For when you go to a concert to be safe. When you gather with your friends, when you're on the street. That's what this is about, is the rights of people to be safe in our country. And right now we have gun laws that really are not upholding those rights of us to be safe. I would also not take any money from the NRA, and honestly, folks, they wouldn't give any to me. I'm not singing that song. But think about the things we could do that are common sense, just common sense. These weapons of war that we have on our streets, those aren't about hunting, those aren't about protection, those are about weapons of war, and we need to get rid of them. We need to make sure we have the right age for the guns that we have. We need to make sure that we have background checks, because as a doctor, I will tell you there are some people that should not have a gun in their hands. And certainly, I always think of the domestic violence and making sure that people are safe in those environments. But we have so many things we could do to make common sense gun laws available. And I will tell you lastly, as a doctor, I've been in those emergency rooms when loved ones have been lost because of gun violence. I have some personal history with my family. This is something that has got to stop, and I think we all know it, and we have got to get the leadership to do that, and I will make sure that those stand your ground laws and those sort of things are going to be gone under my administration.
Thank you. Mr. Norris.
Here's another example of the gun lobby's influence on this governor. Our Department of Human Services issued a rule that require home daycare providers to notify their parents that they had guns in the house and they were secured and locked up. Now, what parent would not expect, or should be able to expect, that they would know when they dropped their kids off in the morning, if there were guns in that house, they were secure. She denied that rule. What more egregious examples of that power of the gun lobby than her not willing to stand up and empower parents to protect their children? You know, I was proud to get the Moms Demand Action candidate distinction. Now, I did what I should never do, and my campaign staff always advised me, don't get on that Facebook stuff, because it'll just discourage you, some of those comments. But let me read you, I couldn't help it this morning on the drive over here. And so we posted that I got the Moms Demand Action distinction, and here's one of the responses from Joanne. Poppycock. We have had guns since the founding of this country. We've had children since the founding of this country. This is a concentrated move to confiscate guns. Leave them alone. Don't whine about saving the children. We are not deceived. I think it's time for conversation to be over. It's time for leadership. We need to have responsible gun laws in this state. Universal background checks, banning the accessories that turn automatic weapons, semi-automatic weapons into automatic weapons. I'm a hunter. My brother is the 7-time state shooting champion. This is not about confiscating guns. This is about the NRA and the gun lobby manufacturing fear and misrepresenting what this argument is about. We've got to change it.
Thank you. Mr. Wilburn.
I'm not a gun owner. However, having served in the Iowa Army National Guard, I know how to fire and use multiple weapons of war. And that's exactly what they are, weapons of war. There's no need for those to be in public hands without any special type of training or controlled circumstances. We can honor the Second Amendment and have sensible, responsible gun ownership in this state and in this country. We have to have those background checks. We have to work, the governor has to work, not hide their head, but has to work with other governors to try and push for universal background checks across the country so that we can't have these loopholes so that people can go to one state and bring them into our state. We've been fortunate not to have had some of the large shootings that have happened across the country, and we don't want those here in Iowa. We don't want those for our children. We don't want them for our teachers. We don't want them for our seniors, anyone in the community. It is about stoking fear. It should not be easier to get an AR-15 or any other automatic weapon or accessory than it is to get your driver's license. Where there's training, there's a matter of time. This is common sense. This is about Iowans making sure that we're respecting each other's safety. And it's great what the young people have been doing. One of the things that the NRA, that they don't talk about when they wave the Second Amendment flags, they don't talk about the First Amendment. And so I applaud the young people for using their speech. We need to join our speech with theirs, not just think beyond, well, it's just a bunch of kids, but this is about all of us to make sure that Iowans are safe. We can have this in the state. We've got to have a Democratic governor. We've got to have control back in the Iowa House and the Senate.
Thank you. Mr. Bolton.
Thank you for the question. As we look at this debate, I was very proud to join students who stood up and said that there are two sides to this discussion yesterday. And it was a powerful moment for a lot of us. I'm someone who believes we should be judged by our actions, not just our talking points on this debate. I'm someone who has had to cast that yes or no vote on some of these tough issues as they've come to the Iowa Senate. I'm someone who, as the legislature took up last year's omnibus gun bill that expanded the use of deadly force to include mistakes, that expanded the carrying of guns into our capital, into our public forums across the state, I stood up against it. I brought in the chief of police from Des Moines, the chief of police from Pleasant Hill, the two communities that I represent, to say, where was the voice of law enforcement in this whole discussion? The people that are making those split-second decisions on our streets, trying to keep our streets safe from gun violence. Where was their moment for consideration? Pleasant Hill had an active shooter situation in 2014 where someone was out there shooting residents as they got their day started in their driveways. These aren't things that can't happen here. These aren't things that will never happen here. These are things that have happened here. Tom Vilsack became mayor of Mount Pleasant because the mayor of Mount Pleasant was shot in a government proceeding. These are things that can happen here because they have happened here. We need to have two sides to this debate. And it's not about gun owners versus non-gun owners. I'm a gun-owning household myself. I took hunter safety in the 8th grade at Columbus Junction. There's responsible gun ownership. There's also community safety and security. There's room for both in the same conversation. And we have to start doing that again. And on the issue of NRA money, I'm someone who ran a competitive state senate primary, a competitive state senate general election, and in this race for governor, I've never accepted a check from the NRA.
Thank you. Ms. Glosson.
Well, as an intensive care nurse working at the University of Iowa hospitals and clinics for decades, I've seen firsthand how gun violence impacts families in our communities. And this conversation is long overdue. And I support the Second Amendment, I do. But this debate has gone on long enough. And no parent and no person should ever walk out the door of their house and worry whether their child or someone in their family is going to return home at the end of the day because of the gun violence that our communities are seeing every day. And I was proud to march along students in the March for Our Lives back in March, and with students advocating for common sense gun reform in our state and in our nation. And I was also proud to stand with the students yesterday in our state capitol demanding change to save lives. I came out back in November with my position on gun safety and gun violence in the backyard of the NRA's president in Grinnell, Iowa. And that is a full ban on assault military-style weapons, including bump stocks. We need thorough and comprehensive universal background checks on every gun sale in the state of Iowa, a 72-hour waiting period between purchasing a gun and having it in your hand, and raising the minimum age to 21 to purchase a gun. It's time we have common sense dialogue about gun reform, but we also have to have common sense dialogue about saving lives and having safe communities. And I am the first Democratic gubernatorial candidate to win the distinction, candidate of distinction for Moms Demand Action, and I'm extremely proud of achieving that.
Thank you. Mr. Battaglia.
Wow. To me, it sounds like I may be able to win the votes from the majority of my neighbors on the south side of Des Moines, Iowa. I think it's an important topic, and I think we need to have the dialogue open. I'm actually soon to be meeting with students, a couple students that led a recent walkout in Des Moines public schools. And I'm happy to talk to anyone from both sides of the issue. I've heard emotional arguments from people on both sides of the issue. For everyone I've talked about that's worried about their child getting shot at school, I've talked to a parent that has fended off, especially in Iowa, fended off their child from a pack of feral dogs to, just in the recent weeks, I've met with people that have a gun on their hip, they're concealed carry, and I've met with people that have a coat hanger around their neck, so I'm not afraid to talk about these issues with all Iowans. I think we need to focus on solutions, and you'll get all these talking heads and pundits telling you this is how we reduce violence. And I've worked for local, state, and national campaigns for going on over a decade now, and they always fail, nearly always, except for in the Libertarian Party, it seems, and maybe a few Republicans and a couple Democrats, to address the elephant in the room. And this is things that are happening in our community. This is drug violence, drug trafficking, human trafficking. The single greatest action that government, state, local, federal can take to reduce gun violence across the board exponentially is to rein in the war on drugs. And that is one of my big issues. I was just at a QT in my neighborhood the other day. A little kid goes to pick up a Federal Reserve note, and their parent snatches out of their hand, and there's a wad of cocaine powder. And we have people that come up and talk to me about human trafficking houses in our neighborhood. We can address those issues, and we all can agree on those issues and reduce violence.
Thank you. Mr. Porter.
Okay. So first of all, on the NRA money, I don't think the NRA gives money to Libertarians, so therefore I can't accept it. I don't think you're going to give it to anyone else here. With that being said, I've got to look at this in a few things. We've all got different ideas up here about what should happen with guns. And it's very difficult in the legislative process to get anything through when you've got so many various ideas about what should happen. There are some people that would be more like me that would say that you do have a right to keep and bear arms. And there's people on the extreme that would say that you do not. I think that to get something through the legislature, you've got to have a lot of dialogue, a lot of talking, and we've got to talk, and that's what we're doing here. That said, I don't think, obviously prohibition does not work. So obviously you cannot confiscate weapons. There's enough weapons out there right now that even if you are to pass legislation, what are you going to do about all the guns that are already out there on the market? They're going to be sold for years. It's very easy to produce. It will eventually lead to a black market. People are not going to give them up. So we can talk about these things, and it's important to, but I don't think that prohibition is going to work one bit. And I think that it can be a very dangerous road that we're going down. I also look at statistics of places that do have more gun control laws than what we've got, such as Chicago. Chicago also has a lot more crime than what we've got here in Iowa. So I don't agree with the people up here on this issue.
Thank you. Our next question, and again, we have many on this topic, so I'm going to leave it up to your discretion as candidates to decide what emphasis you want to put on what part of it, but it has to do with health care. And that involves both a single-payer system, how we would regard that, and it also involves mental health and providing health services for women, all of those kinds of things. I hate to do this to you, but we have so many questions here that I'm just going to have to leave it up to you candidates to determine what you want to do with it. So, your positions, your thoughts on the healthcare system in Iowa, and we will begin with Ms. McGuire.
Well, thank you for the question, and it's interesting that you have all those questions. That's what I hear all over Iowa, is people are very worried about healthcare in this state. So a couple of things. You have to start with the value judgment of healthcare is a right, not a privilege. So every Iowan should have affordable, accessible, quality healthcare everywhere in Iowa. So if you start with that, let's talk about a few of the problems we have. You talked about mental health. I have a mental health plan on my website, but it's just a start. I talk to people who are struggling. I'm going to guess everybody in this room has a family member or a friend that they know that's struggling with substance abuse, mental health problems. And you know what? We're 50th in mental health beds in Iowa. 50th. We're 47th in mental health providers. And honestly, if you talk to the sheriffs around the state, they'll tell you that they're the first line mental health providers. And God bless them for keeping people safe, but they don't have anywhere to take them. So they take them to the emergency room or to the jail. Now those are two of the most expensive and worst places for someone who's in crisis. Think about if one of you had a broken leg or diabetes. Those are two injuries and illnesses. We would never think of taking you to jail, but we think of taking mental health, people who are suffering with mental health disease, to jail. We've got to stop that. And that's what my mental health plan is all about. I also want to talk about women's health. We have 15,000 women who no longer have their Planned Parenthood clinics because of the defunding of Planned Parenthood by the Reynolds administration. They talk about how they don't know where they're going to get their cancer screenings. This is women's health, folks. Don't ever forget that. And we must always make sure we have available, affordable, quality health care for everyone, and Planned Parenthood is a wonderful part of that. We also have to talk about nursing homes. Our seniors are so important, and yet we've gotten to the budget point where we're not even having an ombudsman go visit the nursing homes anymore. These are the people who built our schools and our churches. We've got to protect our seniors. There are so many things we could talk about healthcare, but as a doctor, I will tell you I have the expertise and the ability to fix this.
Thank you. Mr. Norris.
The most dominant issue I've run into throughout this governor's campaign is the failure of our mental health system. We have got to address it. We have no children's mental health system. That has to be addressed. Secondly, our regional system needs to set expectations for a continuum of care that exists in each region. So we know Iowans are getting the care they need. It's impacting our workforce, it's impacting our communities, and nearly every family. It's compounded by the fact that nearly 70% of mental health patients are on Medicaid. The privatization of Medicaid is structurally flawed. The behavior defines this as an organization or a operation that is driven by profit. It's structurally flawed. You should have a healthcare system that's driven by healthcare services, not profit and bottom line. We've got to bring the Medicaid system back into a state-administered program. So we put the healthcare needs of our most vulnerable Iowans first. And yes, every Iowan needs access to quality healthcare. I've advocated for a Medicaid opt-in for families who can't get insurance or afford insurance in the marketplace. So we leave no Iowan uncovered. We are the fastest growing segment of our population in Iowa is 85 and older. Think about that. Our direct care workforce turns over 60% every year. We've got to raise wages, help training, and attract more Iowans into direct care workforce. I'd like to see a caring community initiative for the state of Iowa and start a care corps to introduce Iowans to helping support our caregiver services. You have an incredible family caregiver services here at the Mercy Hospital that Kathy Good runs. I was so impressed. I want to model that across the state so that we can help make sure that our elderly Iowans get care in the home and care in their nursing facilities. But grounding the long-term care hospitals and defunding the area agencies on aging is not the way to do it.
Thank you. Mr. Wilburn.
Mental health care has been the number one issue that I've come across as I've traveled across the state. And it's unfortunate that mental health and health care have become separate because they should be one. We should be looking at wellness and preventative care and emphasizing that. I mean, it's the number one reason I supported President Obama when he was running for office with some relatives with pre-existing health conditions, and the Affordable Care Act was a major first step. I support the Medicare for All, but until that time, I support that single-payer option. We've got to reverse the privatization of Medicaid. I would change the relationship between the governor's office and our health care providers and our mental health care providers. With these third parties out of the state, they don't know Iowans, they don't know the history, and they are in the private market, so they are looking to make profit, which means either costs are going to go up, or providers are not going to receive pay, or folks that need the care are not going to be getting the care and services that they need. There's so many layers to the healthcare issue, but one thing that I want to make sure that I always mention is it's great that the opioid crisis has been getting the attention that it has, and just that focus will start to begin the process of getting providers, doctors aware when they write scripts to be careful in the amount that they are giving. But I want to bring up that we're treating the opioid crisis like we should be treating folks who have committed nonviolent offenses and are sitting in our corrections system. And we need to have criminal justice reform so that we are offering those types of services and support. The very same reason pain management, not looking towards what a lot of people are turning towards, self-medicating in a variety of ways and fashions. So again, I changed the relationship between the governor's office and we can innovate out there, and I would tap into that.
Thank you. Mr. Bolton.
This is a critical quality of life issue in our state. When we start talking about our long-term vision forward, how we take care of each other in terms of our healthcare system is a critical thing to have to deal with right now before we see our state slip further and further into a situation where it's going to be harder for us to recruit and retain quality people to stay in our state for the sustainable future. We have a governor right now who mentioned in her condition of the state address that mistakes were made when privatized managed care was brought into our Medicaid system. Yeah, mistakes were made, but that's not leadership. Leadership is offering a solution to the problem, not just identifying that mistakes were made. There's been no plan of action there. I've worked with other senators to offer solutions. Offer the solution very simply of introducing legislation that would get us out of the managed care organizations, cancel their contracts, and get us to a new transition period to get services brought to Iowa for Iowans by Iowans. Have Iowans taking care of each other again. That's the single biggest threat to all the other parts of our healthcare crisis in Iowa. We have a crisis in terms of getting children access to quality health insurance. We have an access issue in terms of mental health care across our state. again, I've introduced legislation to address those things, co-sponsoring with Senator Peterson a bill that would expand access to Hawkeye so more families can get coverage for their children in health insurance. I'm on the Hawkeye board. I've seen the successes of that program. I've stood up for mental health care. When they shut down 2 of our state's 4 mental health institutes, I took the case all the way to the Iowa Supreme Court, arguing in front of the Supreme Court, and then introducing legislation to force reopening 2 of our state's mental health facilities. I've done the things that we need to do to start showing what that path forward should be and could be. I've stood up to the defunding of Planned Parenthood. I've stood up to their cuts that threaten the access to health care in our rural communities. As governor, we're going to start leading on these things as opposed to waiting for disasters to happen.
Thank you. Ms. Glosson.
As a registered nurse, providing decades of care to Iowans, I've seen firsthand how the for-profit health insurance industry will always put profits over patients and people every single time. And we can see how that's played out with the privatization of Medicaid in our state. It has been devastating, not just for the patients, but the providers who aren't being paid. So I support the reversal of the privatization of Medicaid. I just want to say that up front. I also know that when Terry Branstad and Kim Reynolds shuttered mental health clinics and defunded Planned Parenthood, thousands of Iowans lost access to health care, and that's wrong. And we need to fight to reopen the clinics that they closed so that we get the reproductive and mental health needs met. That being said, that's the first step, but that's only the first step. And I'm the only Democratic candidate for governor, again, that has come out from day one of my campaign supporting universal, single-payer health care for all. I've been a nurse on the front lines of healthcare, fighting for healthcare reform for decades. We need to cover every single Iowan so that you get the care you need whenever you need it, and you shouldn't have to worry about how you're going to pay the bill at the end of the day. And I'm proud to take that position because the current system and the healthcare system that we have now is unsustainable. And I'm proud to be the only candidate standing on universal single-payer healthcare.
Thank you. Mr. Hubble.
Thank you. Every meeting we have, every county, every community, every farm, every coffee shop we go to, healthcare comes up. Every single meeting. And that's why it's one of my top priorities if I become governor. I want to make sure every Iowan has access to quality, affordable health care. And that starts by, on day one, reversing the privatization of Medicaid. It's been an absolute failure. Over 40,000 Iowans have had their benefits denied or reduced. Providers all across the state, large and small, have had their cash flow decimated by failing to get proper payments. Matter of fact, many of them have had to actually close. We were in Centerville just recently. People still remember the critical access center down there that was closed because Medicaid didn't pay properly. We also need to restore funding to Planned Parenthood. I actually served on the board of Planned Parenthood for 8 years, and I chaired it for a year. So I've seen up close and personal the wonderful work that they do, whether it's education, STD testing, cancer screenings, family planning services all over the state of Iowa. By defunding them, it cost Iowa $5 million, and 15,000 people were denied access to health care. It's absolutely the wrong direction. We need to restore that funding. Mental health. It's a crisis with substance abuse that keeps growing all across Iowa. Our governor was excited to sign a bill recently that has actually some good ideas for mental health. But you know what? There's no funding. There will be no results. I want to be the governor that delivers results. 6 years ago, people at Broadlands Hospital came to my wife and myself and said, look, we have mental health patients in the hallways, no place to put them. So we went together with a bunch of other people. 6 years later, they have 50% increase in mental health beds, and they have 2 new psychiatrists. That's leadership. That's getting results for people. That's the kind of governor that we need. But it's also an environmental health issue. Air and water quality continues to deteriorate all across our state, and that clearly has health issues for Iowans in every corner of our state. So we also need to come together as Iowans and have permanent long-term solutions for our environmental air and health care, air and water health care. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Porter.
Healthcare is by far the biggest issue that people have asked about as I've been on the campaign trail. We've done forums on mental health. That's the question that no matter which community I'm in, it always gets asked. It's very complex, and you've also got to look at the federal government. There are things that the federal government could do and could quit doing that would drive down costs immediately. The governor doesn't have a whole lot of responsibility for that, but there's a lot of things the governor can do. The privatization of Medicaid, or basically what it was a handout to big corporations. That should have not happened. That has been disastrous for people, it has been disastrous for the state, and ultimately is going to lead to more and more problems until we reverse that. One of the other things that I thought was horrendous that had happened was the closing down of the mental health facilities. What this did was it obviously hurt the people that would benefit from these facilities, but it also hurt local governments that now have to take on that cost. It was not a good idea. It created more problems, and it's ultimately driving up the cost to taxpayers and the cost to society. That's something that we should address. Third thing I really want to discuss, though, is the ability for people to choose their own medication. That includes cannabis oil. That's something the legislature has kicked the can down the road for years and years and years while people suffer. People should be free to choose their medication as long as they're not hurting anyone else. And I failed to see how the cannabis oil is hurting anyone else. We're talking about an oil, you can't get high off of it, but our legislature continues to kick the can down the road while children have suffered.
Thank you. Mr. Badaglia.
Thank you. Governor Reynolds said that, so she's doubled down basically, saying that she believes in the current crony capitalism regarding states' Medicaid. This is not a classic Republican or a classic liberal position, and this is not the right thing for Iowans at this time. I believe that true free market solutions will not leave the most vulnerable among us in a lurch. I think my plan will get us more hospitals and more access to medical care, lower prices. Basically, there's this fear-mongering that we would not look out for special needs or low-income individuals, and I'm running in part to show this could not be further from the truth. What we see from really Republicans in power lately is they run into these budget crunches and pull from emergency funds, and they make haphazard cuts that affect people with special needs, kids, people that have an extreme medical condition. We do want to move to cash for care and move away from state insurance for basic things like a tune-up. You don't do that when you get your car checked up. When you change your oil, you don't use insurance for that. But we do want to cover people that are being cut out by what the Republicans have been doing of late. We want to tackle opioids head on. It doesn't just affect working class and the poor among us, but even, I believe, some classic American icons like Paul Gray, Prince, Tom Petty. These are people that are victims of the war on drugs. And same with mental health. That's a big part of my platform. We'll get into that more as well.
Thank you. Our next question has to do with the environment. And again, I'm opening that big umbrella to include a lot of issues. That would include an energy policy and water quality and supporting the state, communities in the state as they work to try and become more environmentally friendly. So we will begin this question on the environment with Mr. Norris.
Thank you. I spent a great portion of my life in this issue. I involves both agriculture and energy. I believe we need to change the culture and practice of farming in this state. We are treating our land like an extraction industry and not like a living organism that needs to have regenerative health. So we have to invest in public research. We should have been doubling the funding for the Leopold Center, not eliminating the funding for the Leopold Center, to help farmers realize how they can farm more profitably and more sustainably. Rebuilding soil health also removes nitrates and phosphates from our water runoff. I've called for a moratorium on confined animal feeding operations until we have a new master matrix that really has enforceable environmental rules. Think about this. Last year we raised 23 million hogs in this state. They produce the equivalent of the waste of 130 million human beings. What's the limit? What's the limit on how much we can grow without continuing to degrade our environment? We now have E. coli showing up in underground aquifers because we're not regulating and enforcing rules against those animal feeding operations. In 2009, I launched the Iowa Green Corps when I was chairman of the Iowa Utilities Board. I was so excited to go down to Centerville recently, where that community is becoming an energy independent community with renewable energy. When I was Governor Vilsack's chief of staff, I chaired the committee that developed the legislation that led to Iowa's wind energy build-out, which is why President Obama appointed me to the Federal Energy Commission with the charge to battle climate change through renewable energy and energy efficiency. We've got to address climate change. We've got to address our water quality issue, our soil health issue. It starts with how we treat the land. I was also excited to be at the Practical Farmers of Iowa convention about a month or two ago in Ames, and I saw so many young farmers wanting to make a living off sustainable, diversified agriculture. That's where we need to grow the ag industry in this state, through diversified, sustainable agriculture and clean up our environment.
Thank you. Mr. Wilbur.
I've been working at Iowa State University Extension and Outreach in Ames for the past 3.5 years since I left Iowa City, and I've been very impressed with the workers that we have in terms of working with folks over at the Leopold Center, but in terms of trying to educate about no-till and cover crops, diversifying crops, which goes back to making sure that we fund higher education so that our universities are able to do that work in agriculture and environmental sustainability. But what have we done? In 2006 and 2007, I was proud as mayor to sign the U.S. Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement. And I wanted to make sure it wasn't just signing a proclamation like some mayors have done. So sometimes it takes just that effort, that leadership to get your staff involved, to get the public involved in releasing that creativity. Our staff began reviewing energy uses and practices. It led to establishing the Eastside Recycling Center in a partnership with Habitat Restore. It eventually led to purchasing that sand quarry that could have become a private, closed, gated community, so that it was a generational decision. I mentioned earlier about folks at the Borough Land Trust and many seniors who are thinking about those legacy issues. In terms of leadership, let's take care of each other. Let's be Iowa. Let's effectively recreate that master matrix and have the governor give the directive to the Department of Natural Resources and staffing them so that they can enforce the law and mean it, so that we are cleaning up and holding those that are polluting accountable. It's a matter of clean air and clean water for all of us, young people and old alike. And it's something that is critical, that we get a Democrat in office, as well as get the legislature back in order to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Bolton.
All right, these broad topics in 2 minutes, it's a tough challenge, but some of the things that I think we really have to talk about in terms of environment and climate, one of the things is getting us past the idea that these are urban versus rural issues. Nobody in rural or urban Iowa wants unsafe drinking water. Nobody in rural Iowa wants our wildlife habitat to be in a condition where we can't enjoy hunting and fishing. When we talk about the future of farming in Iowa, we're talking about our topsoil, we're talking about our water quality, we're talking about the things that we need to make sure that that is an economic engine for the long-term future. I'm someone who agrees with the voters on the idea that in 2010, we had a constitutional amendment issue on the ballot, and voters spoke very loudly and clearly, and not just in urban Iowa, not just in rural Iowa. What voters said was 60% of the vote. They wanted a real long-term solution for water quality and land management in this state. They said, fund the Waterland Legacy Trust Fund. I'm someone, and when I got to the Iowa Senate, I introduced the bill to do just that. And we had bipartisan support. Our independent Senator David Johnson joined with me. We just missed tripartisan support to get it done. But we've had real movement on that. It's not just at 60%. Now it's polling as high as 70 and 80% support to get real action on this. While Governor Reynolds promised a real solution on water quality, her words were a monumental water quality bill. All we got were the leftovers from last session, an expensive proposal that won't unimpair waterways. And when we talk about climate change, that's economic opportunity for Iowa. We're a state that leads in wind power and solar technologies and biofuels. We can have quality economic development here, leading us out of our dependency on fossil fuels with real quality jobs as we do it. These are opportunities, not things that hold back. I'm proud of the work my wife Andrea does in expanding access to hiking trails with the Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation. If we do these things the right way, they're economic development.
Thank you. Ms. Glosson.
I believe that clean water should be the birthright for every single Iowan. It's not a partisan issue, it's a human right issue. Right now, more than 750 waterways in our state, that's nearly half of our waterways, are polluted. I came out in this campaign, again, from the very beginning, and I sound like a broken record, but I believe in this, that we need a full moratorium on the expansion or new factory farms until fewer than 100 waterways in our state are polluted. And we need to make sure that we hold corporate agribusiness accountable for the pollution that they caused, not the taxpayers of Iowa. And we need to fully fund the Department of Natural Resources and fully fund such amazing expertise at the Leopold Center at Iowa State University. I'm proud that I have leading experts on the state of Iowa on clean water, agriculture, sustainable and regenerative farming practices, on a council that's guiding me in policy, and I would continue that as governor. We have to talk about our environment and climate change as well, because this all impacts our health and well-being in the state of Iowa. We have seen, I know in this room in Cedar Rapids, I was here during the floods of 2008. We've all seen and felt the droughts and the amazing amounts of flooding that we're seeing, the shift in our climate. We've seen over 200 devastating oil spills across our country in a matter of a few years, 3 years. It's time that we talk about fossil fuels, coal and gas industry. I don't support, and I will be bold about this, I don't support expansion or growth of pipelines. It's the past and it's not the future for clean energy. We need to move to a green energy Iowa, 100% clean energy economy, and that means continuing to develop wind. We've done a great job there, but we need to make more investments in solar and biofuels so that these are the jobs of the future, and they have to be good union jobs that pay well. Only candidate that got the 350.org endorsement by a global climate organization.
Thank you. Mr. Hubble.
Thank you. Air, water, environmental health issues have continued to plague our state literally for over 30 years. We've all known about these issues, but we're not making any progress. My wife and I have been working on these topics for most of that 30 years. I chaired the Iowa Power Fund Board for 4 years, helping the state make investments in renewable energy, renewable fuels, wind, solar, energy efficiency, and greenhouse gas reduction projects all across our state. My wife actually served as chair of the State Environmental Protection Commission for 2 years. So we've been deep into these issues. In 2010, we were leaders in supporting and working to get the voters of Iowa to support the Iowa Natural Resources Trust Fund, which is approved by a higher vote, more voters than Branstad got in 2010. When I've been up in that Capitol every year since, the legislature keeps telling me, well, it's a good idea, we need to fund it, but not this year. So our water quality just continues to deteriorate. So does our air quality. It's about time we stood up. We are all Iowans, we are all responsible for this because we've elected those people who have been unwilling to vote to actually fund that Resources Trust Fund. It's not just a rural issue, it's an Iowa issue. We need to come together and get long-term permanent solutions like funding that trust fund. And I think on the CAFO issue, because the CAFOs clearly are contributing to the water quality issue and the air quality issue of our state. I hear it all around the countryside when I'm traveling in Iowa. My proposal is that on day one, we put together a blue ribbon commission of industry leaders as well as legislative leaders and citizens from across the state, board of supervisor representatives, and give them 90 days to come back with recommendations for the legislature to vote on right away to address the loopholes in the law, to address environmental safeguards which are lacking, and to find out how we can give more local control to communities all across the state while still supporting that industry. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McGuire?
Thank you. You know, as a doctor, actually as a scientist, I have a chemistry degree and then a medical doctorate. I want to tell you something. Climate change is a scientific fact. That's why we need science back in our government. It's a scientific fact, and we've got to address it. It's not a rumor, it's not an opinion, it's a scientific fact, and we need to approach it like that. You know, we do have 36% of our energy coming from wind. That's a good first step. We need to foster that. We need to have a governor who wants to foster that. And we also need to expand into more solar. This is something that's economics and good for our environment and impacts climate change. So it's really something we have to foster as a state. I also want to talk about water quality. So as a scientist, you look at things and you go, you know, where are we? Where do we want to go, and how do we get there? So where are we? The Republicans actually said when they heard that there were more than 50% of our waterways were impaired, do you know what they wanted to do? Measure less. That's not how you get to a solution. So you've got to know where you are, and I would measure a lot so I know where I am. I would want to know where I want to go. Well, I'm going to guess every one of us up here and every one of you out there wants clean water, so we know where we want to go. You get everybody to the table. You get metrics and accountability for how you get from one to the other. That's how you get something done in the state, and we are not getting it done. I would also want to have the resources that the I Will vote would give us to get that fostered along. I also would want to do something that our national government has not done, and that's I join up with the Paris Accords. Those were good accords, and we've gone away from us as a nation. I would, as a state, put that back in, because we have got to make this a priority. It's really a health issue, folks. We've talked about some of the problems that happen. This is about your health as much as anything, and so we have to have science back in our government, understand climate change, and understand how important having clean air and water are to our people.
Thank you. Mr. Battaglia.
Environmental freedom. We don't need to read between the lines. We need to turn the page. And I did grow up in Des Moines, Iowa, but you don't get too far. I'm on the deep south side, so I can walk to farms, and I live on an acreage. So I've learned the most actually from digging in the black Iowa dirt. And we have the knowledge, and things are happening, big things right now. And old Bernie Sanders and old Ron Paul would both agree it's happening. And we have hemp legislation that is moving right now. We have cannabis legislation that is moving. We have fields of opportunity for farmers that want to experiment with these things. This will help with the nitrate problem, and we do want to address that head on. I also beseech you, we talk about who's funding who, NRA guns, and whatever, but look at everyone that's running, whether I'm here or not. Look at everyone that's running and see who's taking money from big agriculture. These have been huge donors to Democrats and Republicans in Iowa, and I think we need to phase out. I mean, we have farmers that are losing their farm. My dad grew up on a farm, and maybe I would have been passed down that if not for government interference. Big agricultural subsidies. I'm taking a bold stance against the renewable fuel standard, and I love biofuel. I love the idea of it, but corn biofuel is a failed biofuel, and there's so much we can do, and a lot of great things are happening.
Thank you. Mr. Porter.
You know, a lot of these issues that we're discussing kind of go hand in hand, and two of them do are health care and water quality. I don't think anyone in this room wants bad air quality, bad water quality. That's something that impacts all of us. As I said, rural communities, urban areas, it impacts every single one of us. We want to make sure that I've had friends from other parts of the world that this year, you can't drink water from a faucet. We want to make sure that we don't get to that point here in the state of Iowa also. We want to make sure that we're sustainable for long years to come, that our farms can continue to grow crops. We're not going to do that unless we start to address these issues, and we start to address them now. One thing that we've got to understand is that, yes, as a libertarian, I believe that people should have the right to do what they do with their property, and that includes farm, but you do not have the right to pollute land and hurt other people. You do not have the right to violate my rights to make a profit. The state should punish big polluters. They should not reward them with big corporate handouts. The state should also not pick winners and losers in the marketplace. They have done that at the detriment to our small local farmers. That's something that does need to end. The state, there's also kind of a federal issue. So we talked about like the renewable fuel standard, but we've also got the problem though with the federal government of them supporting big oil. if the federal government was to end all subsidies, I'm confident that our farmers could compete, no problem. And there's so much stuff that we can do, but we all benefit from having good quality of air, good quality of water.
Thank you. Our next question has to do with budgeting. We are going to ask you, what is the key to a healthy budget, and what should be addressed to ensure that there is equality and responsibility for financing our government? And we will begin with Mr. Wilburn.
The budget is a statement of our values. A lot of interest here in the room, a lot of interest around the state on issues that we've talked about. We've talked about education as our #1 priority. We've talked about the healthcare system. We've talked about our natural resources. And so it starts by making sure that our budget reflects those values. We don't do that in terms of our revenue coming in by giving out a tax incentive without expecting a return on our investment. So rather than the Apple deal, the $20 million Apple deal, let's stretch our dollars out and stretch the incentive out across Iowa in smaller to medium-sized cities with small to medium-sized business, so that people don't feel that they need to move to the urban centers in order to have quality of life. I was proud as a city council member and mayor to have inherited a AAA bond rating for the city of Iowa City, the highest a city can have. We continued that throughout my time on city council, and it continues to this day. You do that by planning, you do that by transparency, putting out to the public what the priorities should be. And when we have to make those hard decisions about generating revenue, let's do that, because it shouldn't be about just trying to benefit the top 1% most economically thriving in the state. It should be about the other 99% of us as well. So I would make those targeted tax incentives, make sure that education is a high priority that goes across multiple areas. But I think also we need to be consistent from year to year. And when we make those types of tax incentives, let's layer them. Let's make sure that they are smart, that we're investing in solar and wind and our education systems.
Thank you. Mr. Bolton.
Thank you for the question. I serve on the Appropriations Committee in the Iowa Senate, and I am incredibly frustrated by what is happening with our state's budget right now. If anyone is a fiscally conservative Republican, they got to change how they vote going forward, because this administration has not been fiscally responsible whatsoever. This is fiscal irresponsibility. Right now we're going through mid-year budget cuts, followed by permanent budget cuts, followed by end-of-the-year budget cuts, all while making raids of the rainy day fund and an emergency fund transfer last summer. That was Reynolds, not Branstad, that transferred money from an emergency funds transfer, rather than calling back the legislature and deal with the cause and effect of the budget crisis, just make an emergency transfer of funds. And then not recognize that she's handing out $20 million to Apple, the wealthiest corporation on the planet. What's causing the problem? Right now, we've got $600 million and growing in corporate tax credits, exemptions, and giveaways, blowing a hole in our budget process and making that process less and less certain every year we go forward. At a time when our economy is stable and growing, we've got a 17-year low in unemployment in this state. We're raiding rainy day funds and going through mid-year budget cuts, cutting the things that have long-term payoff, things like higher education, community colleges, and our state universities. I mean, these cuts are going to affect the quality of life of Iowans, but you're not going to solve problems you don't believe exist. And Governor Reynolds, when she was asked about the budget cuts last year, said, well, these cuts haven't affected services. They've cut whole programs. They've defunded things like the Leopold Center completely. To say that they're offering the same level of services is absurd. We've lost 1,300 field staff in DHS over the course of the Branstad-Reynolds administration. We've had 2 children die of starvation with supervised caseloads because caseworkers can't keep up with the work in front of them. We're not going to solve a problem until we deal with its causes. And the overextension of corporate tax credits, exemptions, giveaways that is ruining our state's budget has to come to an end.
Thank you. Ms. Glosson.
Just to put this into perspective, in 2013, our state had a surplus of $927 million. Look at where we are now. And I don't think you'll get a lot of disagreement between us up here that the budget is a mess. Services aren't being funded. We need a governor who's going to put the priorities and values first in a budget, and that's what you do as a true leader. So we need to put investment and put our resources in higher education, K-12 funding, healthcare services and human health services, and make sure that our water's cleaned up. And we absolutely have to look at tax credits. I'll call for a thorough investigation of every corporate tax credit that we give in this state, because if it doesn't lead to a good paying job that's a union job, we shouldn't be giving away our hard-earned taxpayer dollars to companies that won't let workers organize. So it's a question of value and priorities, and I absolutely value public education, healthcare, human services, and clean water over corporate giveaways. And let's face it, this governor has the corporate agribusiness and corporations and lobbyists and CEOs have a stranglehold on our state government. It's time we have new leadership that's willing to stand up and take on corporations that control our state government.
Thank you. Mr. Hubble.
Thank you. This is probably one of the biggest challenges our state faces. But it's not just budgets, it's budgets and priorities. Our governor talks about her priorities, but if you look at her budget, never the twain shall meet. That's the sad fact, folks. We need a governor who knows how to put the budget behind the right priorities. You know, I've been managing complex budgets my entire life, in both the public and private sector, and I've proven I know how to deliver results for the state as well as for employees and communities all across Iowa. When I was when I was leading the Iowa Department of Economic Development, I was asked by Governor Culver to sit on a tax credit review panel. We looked at every single tax credit, tax exemption, deduction, corporate and individual, all across our state. And there are a lot of them, many more than most other states. The recommendations we made then is that there should be a fiscal impact analysis of every single credit exemption deduction, and where they're not producing a good return for our state, it should be reduced or eliminated. We also said we should have a cap on every credit exemption deduction and a sunset provision that would require them all to be reviewed periodically by the legislature. Hardly any of that has ever taken place. The recommendations we made at the time were valued at the point on an annual basis. They would save our state $160 million per year, every year. So the budget has the money. The question is, then what do you do with the priorities? If you're going to be good at budgeting, you got to free it, you got to be responsible in managing your budget, then you need to put the budget behind the right priorities. For me, it's clear, based upon everything I hear across the state, everything I've learned in the years I've worked in the private sector and the public sector, education, job training, and healthcare should be priorities number one. We need to free up those wasteful corporate giveaways. We need to restore that money to invest in education, healthcare, and job training all across our state. Because that's how we can get Iowa growing the right ways, by investing in our state. Thank you.
Ms. McGuire.
The key to the healthy budget is not the mismanagement that we've seen over the last 8 years. I mean, we did, at the end of the last Democratic governor, think about that, there was a $900 million plus budget surplus. We were doing a job of definitely being financially responsible. And yet, in the last 8 years, and I would ask you what you've gotten for this, we have no surplus, and frankly, we have a deficit. Where's that money gone? Has it helped Iowa be better? So I always think about Iowa's revenues every year, they go up. What doesn't go up is our tax problem, because we have giving it away before it even gets to the priorities that we want it to get to. So what I always think of is we don't have a revenue problem, folks. We have a priority problem. And we have to fix that priority problem. Now, like you've heard, I think we need to look at these tax credits. And I've always said, people say, well, we won't have tax credits. Actually, some tax credits are really good. If I give you $1 and you give me back $100 in value, I want that tax credit every day. But we're giving away tax credits that aren't giving us a dime back. And especially aren't giving us a dime back down the road, and we just keep giving out that money. That is really not appropriate. So I would look at every tax credit and say, is it giving me back my money? As a mom, I'm a fiscal person. If I give you something, I want something in return, and we're not getting it. That's the kind of governor I'd be. We also have to talk about why we got into this mess in the first place. And it's because we didn't have the right priorities. We didn't have the priorities of healthcare. We didn't have the priorities of education. You know, it's not that expensive. It really isn't. We have the money sitting there in those tax credits. So it's not like we're talking about more money. We're talking about the priorities and spending it the way we should on people. As I told you, I'm a doctor. I will always put people first. And this is about healthcare. This is about public education. This is about making sure that people are taken care of. That's where our money should go.
Thank you. Mr. Norris.
Well, I mentioned I serve as Governor Vilsack's chief of staff, so I have a little experience in cleaning up budget messes left by Terry Branstad. We're going to have a bigger mess in 2019. It's very clear. Governor Reynolds has the same philosophy. No new ideas. It's the same philosophy from the 80s when Ronald Reagan and trickle-down economics cut taxes for the wealthy and expected all of us to be better off because of that. What it's eroded is our capacity to invest in our future. That is a priority of the purpose of a budget, to set your priorities. I believe we should roll back a number of the tax credits and deductions and special giveaways we've done in the last 5 years that have eroded about $600 million of state annual revenue. Capping credits, changing some credits for deductions, getting rid of those that aren't serving any useful purpose anymore, and restore some of those revenues. We've got to restore those revenues and initially invest in pre-K through 12th grade public education so that is solidified. Address our mental health needs. It's got to be a priority for our workforce. Because I talk to business and industry around this state, they can't find workers. Now, the first thing I tell them is to think about raising wages. But it's not just about wages. We've got to invest in our future and our people. For the $20 million we gave Apple for 50 jobs, we could have eliminated the child care cliff for the parents of 5,000 children and extended child care benefits out further so people stay in the workforce and break the cycle of poverty. But her chief economic development strategy is to lure out-of-state businesses here with tax cuts. And that is undermining our fiscal capacity to invest in our future. Revenue matters. Revenue matters for business. It matters for government. It should always be fair and run efficiently. But when we cut our future, well, you know what happens.
Thank you. Mr. Porter.
Budget is the biggest reason why I'm running. You could make a horror film out of this. Boris Karloff could come back and he could play Kim Reynolds. It's a disaster what's going on right here. We take a look at what's happening. The state is not paying tax refunds on time. They lie about it. Oh, but we're withholding it for security. Whenever I was a teenager, that's what I used to do whenever I didn't have the money to pay the bill. I was about 19. I'd put the bill back in the mailbox and hope no one notices. Eventually that catches up with you. That's what the state is doing right here. The state is not properly budgeting, and I think what they're doing is they're setting their spending levels, and then they're just estimating a forecast that's unrealistic. That way they can justify their spending, and then mid-year they're making cuts to it. Why do we have to do this? As many people mentioned, the tax credits. Tax credits are going to businesses that are not even paying taxes. They're cutting them a welfare check. Welfare checks to financially sound out-of-state corporations. They're putting us, the small businesses, with the bill. I don't get a tax credit, a small business owner. They're not doing it, and they're also passing the tax burden onto the poorest islands. There's a plan, I'm pretty sure they're going to try it here soon, to raise the state sales tax, a tax on the poorest islands to pay so they can give more in corporate handouts. And you ask for solutions, and what do they always say? We need more tax credits to bring in jobs. More tax credits to bring in jobs, because that will bring in more revenues. It hasn't worked, it isn't working, and it's time to do something different. They used to call Chet Culver, I think it was Debt Culver, right? They have no room to criticize, no room to criticize. We had a much better budget, we had better services a few years ago than what we did. They have increased spending, they have not cut any of their tax cuts, though. They've put the state in a really, really, really bad position, and it's something that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. Mr. Padaglio.
At a number of these events and forums when we find ourselves together, I often find myself wondering, wishing Reynolds and Corbett could be here so we can hear them defend the establishment on this issue. And it's like Groundhog's Day every time. I wish Reynolds and Corbett could be here to explain how they're fiscally conservative. Sound money is easy. Allowing for competing currency is easy. Letting people experiment with cryptocurrency, with gold and silver, any of that is easy for a state to do. We can lead by example in terms of budgeting and being fiscally conservative. I've spent far less money than anyone up here, and I feel I have similar name recognition to most of the people up here. So you start by leading by example. Everyone I've worked for politically, local, state, federal, has had a plan to rein in debt and to balance a budget. I've not learned anything but that. And we got these things going on where state and federal are causing these messes. Iowa Democrats supported Vilsack, Culver, by extension Clinton, NAFTA that torpedoed us and allowed big banks to get in and plunder here and all of North America, really. You got Bill Northey, Mike Pompeo, the president talking tariffs and sanctions. What year is this? Tariffs, sanctions. You're strangling the Iowa farmers that helped get you elected. What are you doing? You got Washington, D.C. with a guy named Mad Dog who's talking the most sense. I mean, come on. Reynolds goes there to beg for, keep this renewable fuel standard strong, help the big factory farms and CAFOs. I would go there to just plead, let's think about, let Congress take some of their roles back in terms of agriculture and military before we let Steve King torpedo the Farm Bill again.
Thank you. The next handful of questions that I have all kind of fall under the same thing that the League of Women Voters is particularly interested in, because we are a nonpartisan organization. We want to work for a better future for all. And that means, how do you design a positive path forward? And some of this has to do with bipartisan cooperation, which now seems a lost art. But if there's an opportunity here, it would seem that it would be in the governor's office to set the tone. What could you specifically do to rework the way that government works in the United States, but in particular in Iowa, if you were to be elected governor? And we'll begin with Mr. Bolton.
That is a great question, because as someone who serves in the Iowa Senate right now, the sting of partisanship is obvious, right? What we've seen is an agenda that has been forced through the legislative process that has sought to shut out voices as opposed to include people over and over again. I'm the ranking Democrat on the Labor Committee. That means I'm the highest ranking Democrat in the Iowa Senate on labor issues. When this administration and this legislature pushed through a public sector bargaining bill that blew up 40 years of labor history in this state, a bill that was signed by a Republican governor, I had 23 hours to review that legislation before the first time I was supposed to vote on it. Our rules required 24 hours, so they had to actually move the time of the meeting because they didn't give me adequate notice on it. We're not going to get to solutions by excluding voices, excluding Iowans from the political process, and excluding parties from the political process. In the Iowa Senate, we have 1.2 million Iowans who are represented by a Democrat in the legislature. Those 1.2 million Iowans deserve a voice in the process. I've gone out of my way as a state senator to reach across the aisle. I've sat down with our Republican freshmen that I came in with to get to know them individually, gone to lunches with them and other things, to get to know who they are, because that's going to be important to getting them to work with us as we push this new path forward for our state. I've worked with Republicans on amendments. We haven't had a lot of Democratic amendments passed in this last 2 years, but I've been able to work to get 3 amendments that I've helped sponsor through to improve legislation. So it's about reaching out. It's about finding ways to see where we have those opportunities to reflect our shared values. A lot of the things we're talking about here in this 2018 election are not Democrat versus Republican issues. They're not urban versus rural issues. They're our Iowa values. And we need to start making sure our political process reflects that.
Thank you. Ms. Glosson.
Well, I believe the number one job of a governor is to improve the standard of living for all Iowans. And a governor needs to lead in that way. A governor needs the people standing with her by her side every step of the way in order to enact the changes that so many Iowans care about. These are issues that are not partisan issues. These are healthcare issues, clean water issues, public education issues that we all deeply care so much about. I'm a believer that when we have politicians and even candidates that tell us they're going to fix things for us, that they're not being very honest. Because the only thing that ever changes politics or policy is a mass movement of people coming together to demand the things that we the people, want to see in our government. So I believe a governor needs to lead in that way. And I also believe that if we let Iowans lead on the ideas and these visions that we care about for public education, raising the minimum wage, healthcare for all, clean water, we absolutely can create the change we want to see. And if we let Iowans rise up and lead, we can enact these bold, progressive values that benefit over 1 million Iowans in our state. And I'm proud when I've traveled the state to talk to folks, and I don't tell them I'm a Democrat running for office. I just talk about the issues, and it's time we put the issues front and center instead of candidates, party, or politics.
Thank you. Mr. Hubble.
Thank you. You know, when I was in the private sector running Yonkers and Equitable Life of Iowa, contrary to a lot of businesses, we didn't focus on maximizing shareholder profit. We focused on making sure that our employees, our communities, and the investors all received value in everything that we did. And when I was in charge of the Power Fund, the leader of the board of directors there, we took over 400 decisions, votes on those 400 decisions. We had bipartisan groups. We had Republican legislators, Democratic legislators, people from around the state. And you know what? Almost every single vote we took was unanimous. So my point is, I don't have special interests. I've never been a politician. I've never run for office before. The only reason I want to be governor is to help improve the lives of Iowans. I think that's the attitude we need in state government. I want to bring people together based on trying to get results by focusing on what unites people, not what divides them. There's way too much divisiveness in our world these days. Let's focus on trying to find common ground and get results, because that's what Iowans want. They want results to improve their education, to improve their health care, to improve their opportunity to get their incomes rising in our state. And they want a governor who knows how to do that by bringing people together and putting people first, because that's what it's going to take. The other thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we address the voting rights in our state. Let's get more people eligible and able to vote. We should go back to Governor Vilsack's rule of allowing felons who served their time, who paid their dues, to be able to vote again. We should restore the changes in voting that were done last year, which are really just an initiative to try to reduce access to the ballot box. I want to get people involved in government. I want people to be open and transparent and discuss what's going on. What they're doing in the legislature this year and last year, where the other party is not even involved. We don't see a huge tax bill. It's probably going to be the biggest tax bill we've seen in Iowa in the last 50 years, and none of us in this room even know what it says. That's wrong. We need transparency and open government. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McGuire.
You know, I think we all know the problem. We see it every day. What we need is a solution. As a doctor, I've worked with healthcare teams my whole life and then in business. And how teams work that are very successful, and I think you all know, is they have to listen to each other. Sometimes you have to have a leader who will set people down and help them listen to each other. And I mean truly listen. We're not doing that right now. And I will tell you, somebody laughed the other day. I said, Governor, I'll get my mom voice out, and I will make sure that people listen to each other. Because think about the things that we're talking about a partisan here. Healthcare. You know, what's the Democratic or Republican view about healthcare? Healthcare is about your life. Healthcare is about your health. That's not something that should ever be partisan, and we have let it be partisan. I will go back to talking about it not being partisan. Education. Nobody asks you when you come to kindergarten whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. This is education. This is how, having world-class education is how I become successful. It should not be an issue that's partisan. So I would think that the best way to do that is to sit down and listen to what the problems are. And I also believe that you've got to listen to the voice of the voter. I tell you, yesterday was very exciting, I thought, with having all those young people. And one of them was so upset because she won't turn 18 by the time we can vote. That's what we need. We need that kind of participation. And I will tell you, this voting suppression that went on in the last legislative session is exactly the opposite. What I would like to do is listen to voters. I would like to go all the way to have mail-in voting so that we can have everyone participate. It's much better participation and it's cheaper. So I think we need to talk about how to get participation from everyone, so we listen to the voters, so we get the legislature and the governor to listen to each other, and we have that leadership to get to a solution as a team.
Thank you. Mr. Norris.
You put ideals and values first. You know, I helped form the Rainbow Coalition in Iowa in 1987 and ran Jesse Jackson's campaign for president. A former chair of the Democratic Party of Iowa told me I'd be finished in Democratic politics. 10 years later, I was made the chair of our Democratic Party in the state of Iowa. And that tells me you follow your ideals and your values first, the politics will take care of itself. Two critical words I think are important here: transparency and inclusiveness. We need more transparency in government, so the public has greater confidence in how our decisions are made and why they were made. And inclusiveness of people from all walks of life and all party in our decision making. We should be responsible for sharing ideas, but also sharing credit where credit is due, not based on partisan credit, but who contributed the most to the solution. When I'm governor, I'm going to sit in that big old conference table, the governor's office, and bring in Republican and Democratic leaders. And we're going to identify the easiest problem we can identify that needs to get solved. And we're going to work to find a resolution. Because we've lost our capacity to work together. And once you solve the easiest problem, the next more difficult problem becomes that much easier to find a resolution for. That's what has to take place. We've got to put the training wheels back on our democracy. And I want to take issue with one thing, Fred, and I say this respectfully, but articulating that you're qualified for the highest political job in the state because you're not a politician is not recognizing the value of a politician in politics. There are a number of state legislators, they're all politicians. You were CEO of an insurance company. Not much more political than that. I served on the Iowa Ballot Fund Board with you. Those were political decisions. I think it's okay to recognize the value of being a good politician, because that's how you drive the public towards good decisions.
Thank you. Mr. Wilburn.
There's no magic solution, but I know in my years of experience as a former social worker, as someone who served in the military, as a former local elected official, that it's about relationship and it is about values. You can extend your hand, but you can't make someone shake it. So you have to have opportunities for input, opportunities for that transparency, and opportunities to discuss and dialogue. As a mayor and former city council member, each and every week, you've got to come to agreement on something. Trash, recycling still needs to get picked up. Water still needs to come out of the fountain. Parks have to be taken care of. So it takes that continual dialogue and discussion. I did it as a former youth counselor. I can't think of any other way when you've got some teenagers and their parents and some things that happen at schools where you've got to listen first. And back to being a local elected official, sometimes the public and some of the interest groups would get upset with me because we'd have a public hearing and they want to know where I stand. And I said, well, we haven't had the public hearing yet. At some of those public hearings, I don't know if some of you may be familiar with the Native American talking stick, but a friend of mine, a colleague, created a listening stick. And there are times I kept the listening stick in front of me at those public hearings to make sure I've got the power, I've got the vote, but I've got to listen first. And I was state extension outreach. I'm the diversity officer. And I train our workers in 99 counties on a cultural competency training called Navigating Difference. Regardless of what our difference is, let's put some tools and strategies in place to have relationship so that we can find common areas to agree and move forward and let some of the differences, park them aside for now. That's the approach I would have. I would continue to have public input, even doing something like former Governor Tommy Thompson of Illinois had, a monthly radio station to call in, just so that you're continually hearing from the public on issues, and put my best foot forward.
Thank you. Mr. Battaglia.
I think that we are in a unique position to kind of work against some of the vitriol, and you step out there and there's a lot of arguing back and forth about issues that are not even in the legislature that we can't really help with right now. I think a third party or independent, a libertarian, is in a unique position to we have some healing to do, and we can help with that. I have allies across the state that help me get on the ballot, and we know that that's challenging. I know you guys are familiar with one guy that didn't accomplish that, and we have, I really wanted them to have a contested primary, so that disappointed me. But I had people like Huey Tweedy over in Lee County. I love Lee County, and I went to his protests in terms of eminent domain abuse, where the government was using force to decide what he was going to do, what they were going to do with his land, and things like that. I've actually been on the front lines with Iowans, and when we get libertarians elected, we have a track record of good things. You'll say maybe there's not that many, but I encourage you to look over to Nebraska Libertarian Senator Laura Epke, what she's doing with occupational board reform, the Occupational Board Reform Act. This is being praised bipartisan, both parties, independents, federal, state. I mean, they're looking at this, and we can do great things when we get on board. Maybe some of our candidates with wild ideas, they won't, those won't pick up steam in the legislature, but our good ideas will. I want to leave us with so much money, Democrats and Republicans won't know what to do with your money, and they'll have no choice but to give it back to you. And I picked this up along the campaign trail, and I think it was Austin Peterson. You can be born a Republican or a Democrat, but you have to think to be a Libertarian.
Thank you. Mr. Porter.
Our politics have gotten really, really nasty. It's not Iowa nice. It's not Iowa nice, calling voters that we may disagree with on an issue unhinged or mentally unstable is probably not a good idea to where we want to start the discussion at in Iowa. I don't plan to do that. I've worked before with the Iowa Senate Democrats. Years ago, we had a issue where you could not register as a Libertarian. You were supposed to be able to. There was a database issue that the Secretary of State's office had. They were not helpful in getting it fixed. And so I contacted Mike Ronstall, actually, who was my senator at the time, and he put me in contact with his staff, and they were able to help me get this issue resolved within a matter of a few weeks, and we thought it would take years. We've been suffering from this for years. Within a matter of a few weeks after contacting him and working together, we sat down and we came up with a solution, and also worked with the Republicans at the Secretary of State's office when that happened. That can happen, but we didn't do that by fighting, by accusing, by saying, well, you know what, the Democrats will never help us, they don't want us on the ballot. Well, no. There are a lot of people that when you ask for help, they'll help. We can sit up here and we can disagree on some of the issues, but I don't have a bad word to say about anyone, even my primary opponent here, I don't have a bad word to say about it. And if you want to look at how libertarians will campaign, and if you want to do that, just look at how we've ran our primary. We've been very friendly. We've traveled across the state debating each other. No negative attack ads yet. No, we're not going to do that. But one thing I would do is I would bring everyone in. And as a libertarian, we can work with people on all sides of the issue, Democrats and Republicans. And I think there's a good way that we can do that because we're not part of the other two major parties that have had problems working together in the past. We can bring everyone together and say, what are some issues, what are some things that we can work on? A lot of these issues are issues for all Iowans, not just Democrats, Republicans, or Libertarians.
Thank you. We've come to our last question, and it's an old reporter's trick, and I am an old reporter, so, but I think it helps you kind of keep on your toes and also add some clarity in your campaign. What is your answer to the issue question you wished we would have asked? So tell us what the question is, and then give us your answer. And we can start with Ms. Glassy.
Why do I always have to get the difficult start? Wow, well, we've covered, I'm trying to think of all the topics we've covered today, but we didn't elaborate on raising the minimum wage and unions particularly. So how do you improve the economy how do you as a gubernatorial candidate plan on building an economy that leads into the future for all of Iowa, and improve the standard of living for all Iowans? And, you know, I'm a union leader, and I believe that we absolutely need to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. We need to do it quickly, as I said in my introductory remarks. But we didn't talk about collective bargaining as deeply as I would like to. Allowing workers to form and join a union is the only way that working people in our state or in our country have ever gotten ahead. And we have been under attack, not just in Iowa, but in this country, to lower the standards for workers, and that's core to who I am as a union leader, as a nurse, a mom, a wife, and a grandmother. It's the only thing that's built the middle class, and it's the only way our economy in Iowa will thrive. And when we talk about getting businesses to open businesses in rural or urban centers, those need to be good union jobs. And we need a leader in state government that's going to make sure that those workers can form a union without fear and intimidation from employers. And we need to find new opportunities, not legislated, but new opportunities that a governor can bring to the table to help those workers form a union and have a voice on the job. It's time we get the corporate takeover of government out and have leaders in this state that are willing to stand up and have a spine to do it. And I believe that I have the qualifications as a nurse and a union leader. Don't mess with a nurse, I've said before. Do not mess with a nurse, because we know what it takes to heal, and we can stand up to status quo politics and corporations as much as any politician on this stage can.
Thank you. Mr. Hubble.
Thank you. You know, one of the topics we've not discussed is incomes for Iowans in our state. Unfortunately, when I was in Independence, Iowa, not too long ago, a man told us that they haven't seen any personal income growth in Independence, Iowa in 5 or 6 years. And when I travel around the state, and I mention that, almost every time people in that community, the next community, they nod their heads and say, you know, it's the same thing here. And last year, Iowa had the second lowest personal income growth rate in the country. That's second from worst. It's a terrible indictment of the economic and business policies of Governor Reynolds and the Republicans in the legislature. They're failing Iowans. We have record low unemployment, but we have absolutely no personal income growth. And other states are getting it. So what do we need to do? We need to attract higher quality jobs that pay living wages in our state, rather than all these jobs that bring in $15 wages, which are not livable wages. So how are we going to do that? First of all, we need to have an open, inclusive, welcoming community where we encourage people to move to our state. We don't have sanctuary cities. We already have good public safety. We don't need to enhance our public safety because a few people in the legislature think that's the right thing to do, when all the police chiefs and the county sheriffs across the state are against it. We need to send the right message all around this country that Iowa is an open, welcoming state, and we want people to move here, go to work here, and raise their families. We need to restore collective bargaining rights. We need to raise the minimum wage and let communities go higher if they want to. And we also need to give people the education and health care, job training that they need to qualify for those higher paid jobs. And we need to invest in roads, bridges, affordable housing, and high-speed internet so people can actually work where they live in our state, rather than having to move some other place to get a job. If we make those investments, invest in Iowa, invest in our people, we can actually get our state growing the right way, and that'll support revenue growth for individuals as well as our state. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McGuire.
That's an interesting question, because I was going to talk about health, because honestly there's so much more than you can tackle in 2 minutes, but I think I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to talk about some what you might call women's issues. We've had a real problem in our government with sexual harassment. And yet our governor does not appear to have taken a very strong stand on that. Well, I can tell you as a woman who's felt the sting of being harassed, of being devalued, as your governor, I will always take a strong stand on any kind of harassment, and that means whomever it is. It's not just sexual harassment. You know, this Me Too movement is kind of interesting because it started with sexual harassment, but folks, it's really about every person being treated in an equal manner, being treated as a value. And that's what sexual harassment does, is it devalues who you are as a person. And you also know that's a culture. And that culture is still pervasive in some of our government. We've got to address that. The other issue is childcare. Kind of to slide open. I hear about childcare worries all over the state. And what it is, we want everyone to be productive, but we're a state that has a lot of dual income households. And so it many times falls on the woman to figure out how to get the kids taken care of and still get to work. And we have what's called the childcare cliff. So we have enough resources. We subsidize childcare, but when someone gets to a certain income, they get a raise at work. We all want them to get that promotion. They can't even take it because it makes them lose their childcare subsidy. It would actually make them have less money. And I asked the question, why can't we put it in gradation so we go 75%, 50%, and do that instead of having the cliff? They told me they didn't have enough computer power. I'm pretty sure I have that much computer power in my phone. So I think we have to look at some of the issues that affect our families and our women. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Norris.
I faced the same dilemma that Andy did. But let me just say I agree with everything she said on those women's issues. And we need to address them. Equal pay, equal work, refunding Planned Parenthood, reproductive freedoms, all critical for this state. So let me turn to an issue that many of you know about me. If you know me, I'm unapologetically passionate about rural Iowa. You know, living here in the Cedar Rapids, Iowa City corridor, or the Des Moines, Ames corridor, you cannot afford to sustain the human and physical structure of this entire state. It is to all of our benefit to rebuild the rural economy. I know it can be done. There's no silver bullet, but it's good schools, it's good hospitals. The Medicaid privatization is making that more difficult. It's broadband access, it's diversified sustainable farms, it's renewable energy, it's job training skills, giving our children in those rural communities hope to get a skill to stay and work in their local business. Here's why it's also critical. We can't fund Planned Parenthood. We can't reverse the Chapter 20 legislation. We can't have a rural water quality bill until we as Democrats win the governorship and win back the state legislature. And we will not win back the state legislature or the governorship unless we can win back votes in rural Iowa. In 2002, Tom Harkin won 82 counties. In 2016, Hillary Clinton won 6. You all familiar with Einstein's definition of insanity? If we try and win in 2018 with doubling down again for the urban vote to make up for our increasing losses in rural Iowa, we will find ourselves in the minority party legislature and Governor Reynolds in office doing more damage to our future. That's why it's critical we have a vision as Democrats to rebuild the rural Iowa economy. Not for the exclusion of our urban areas, but we've got to think holistically about move this whole state forward and leave no one behind. That's why I'm fighting for every Iowan and every community.
Thank you. Mr. Wilburn.
I wish we would add a question more towards protecting our civil rights, which helps ensure a welcoming, inclusive Iowa. You know, this is coming to the end of Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and you know that's gender discrimination in its ultimate form. Promoting incentives for our schools, our universities, to have those conversations about diversity, inclusion, and welcomeness. I would strongly support a ban on conversion therapy towards people in the LGBTQ plus community. That's not being Iowa. That's not taking advantage of untapped potential. We've got a group of folks in Iowa that came here in the 70s, welcomed from Southeast Asia by former Governor Ray. Now their children, their grandchildren are part of a welcoming part of our state, our economies, our communities. We've got folks who've been coming here from Africa, from Latin America, and they're working jobs. They're carpenters, they're teachers. They're working, you know, some of the public jobs. In some cases, doing jobs that many Iowans wouldn't take. And so we need to welcome them, we need to embrace them. That's the state that we've been. It's the state that we should be. We need to come together and make sure that we've got someone in the governor's office that is going to vigorously enforce civil rights by taking those stands and by supporting the Attorney General's office and all the efforts that they try and do.
Thank you. Mr. Bolton.
I think the missing question here was what's our plan for growing Iowa's economy the responsible way to see economic progress reach throughout our state, geographically and across all other barriers. Right now, we see a transactional economic plan. We're going to give this corporation this coupon to try and attract these low-skill, low-wage jobs for this short term. And what happens when the coupon expires is they go off and that company asks Kansas or Oklahoma or Mississippi for their coupon, and we lose those jobs, and we have those low-skilled workers left behind in our communities. We need to start talking about what our economy would look like. What are the things we can do to get back to marketing to our strength? Our economy is our people, not the number of corporations, not the number of giveaways. It's the most educated, skilled, productive workforce in the world. Making sure we have that through a quality education system. Making sure we have skilled trade apprenticeship programming support. So we have our best and brightest choosing to stay in Iowa and coming to Iowa for a better quality of life. It's about wage growth, something that Branstad and Reynolds originally promised us. Remember, they were promising 200,000 new jobs and an increase in earnings for Iowa families by 25%. Adjusted for inflation in the last 10 years, Iowans are earning 1.3% more than they were 10 years ago. The national average is 1.4%, so they missed it by over 25%. They're not delivering on their promises, and our communities are suffering as a result. I'm someone who has introduced legislation to get our economy growing the right way, bringing transparency to this budgeting process as well as the corporate giveaways by restoring and expanding public sector bargaining rights so our best and brightest choosing the call of public service can succeed, so our teachers are coming into our classrooms for the sustainable future. I proposed equal pay for equal work becoming a reality, not just an idea in this state, making sure that we eliminate the gap and the disparity between our unemployment between persons with disabilities and persons of color and the rest of our community. Getting our economy growing the right way.
Thank you. Mr. Porter.
We've talked about a lot of good issues. There's one that Fred kind of touched upon earlier, and that is criminal justice reform, and there's a certain part of it too I want to talk about first, and that is restoring voting rights to anyone that is paid for their crime and served their time. We used to do this in Iowa, and then we became one of about 3 states to no longer do this. Whenever Governor Branstad a few years ago rescinded the executive order by Tom Vilsack. Since that time, it is very, very difficult to get your voting rights restored. Doesn't matter what you've done, doesn't matter what your crime was, how many years has gone by, you have to petition the governor. The governor's office is very, very slow about doing anything they don't want to do. That includes restoring voting rights. There's about 25,000 Iowans out there that cannot participate in our process. They cannot vote for any of us because they've not had their voting rights restored. That is something that is not just, it is not helpful. You have people that want to be part of society again, want to take part in our elections process. They're very concerned about what's going on. They can't. They have no voice here because we have taken that away from them. That's not Iowa nice. It's not what we should be, not what it goes against our state motto, our liberties we prize and our rights we will maintain. We need to be a little bit more welcoming in getting people back into society. That kind of brings me to my second point too. I think that the governor should appoint a committee that will look at expunging, or look at pardoning, I should say, pardoning people that have been in jail for victimless crimes, such as marijuana possession. Should we really punish people for the rest of their life, making it impossible for them to find work for a youthful indiscretion that happened whenever they were a teenager? Those are things that are often ignored, but they're very important issues that I think we should address, and there's a lot of people impacted by them.
Thank you. Mr. Pataglia.
To start things off with a quote from my protege to the north, who also, hopefully, I joined him in making history. We ain't got time to bleed, and we got suffering Iowans across the board. I want to challenge Simon Conway on the air at WHO Radio to tell me how he thinks that Kim Reynolds is not a quote-unquote open border candidate. We have this sanctuary cities bill that is straight out of the Orwellian Huxley playbook. Tell me what the establishment is doing by creating an environment that allows for the abuse of undocumented immigrants as labor, that actually incentivizes undocumented migration. Tell me how this is not the root of that problem. Another big thing is I've been championing mental health, and I actually encourage everyone up here and everyone running for office to visit Passageways, Clubhouse, Mental Health in Des Moines. I think this is a path that every community in Iowa can follow. I also met with a concerned Iowan that struggles with mental health. He has a project called #IamNotAshamed. He's dealing with addressing the stigma. So if anyone wants to get involved with that, I encourage you. His name's Ross, #IamNotAshamed. And also the cannabis oil. I want to tell you right now, visited shop owners, you can't call yourself libertarian if you're not rooting for small businesses. Under 0.3% right now is legal. You can't confiscate that. That is under the Farm Bill. That is hemp oil. We're working to get it legal across the board. People need the THC, but we're on the front lines trying to help a lot of people. As governor, he could have pardoned Benton McKenzie. He could have called, Branstad could have called a special session saying Iowans are dying. We need to address this now. How much more blood are we going to let, run down into the soil? And governor can call a special session, governor can pardon, and we need governors that are going to help the most vulnerable among us while they're in office.
Thank you. We are running over our time, but we've had some wonderful answers. I think everyone here will agree that this has been time well spent. And I don't want to cut your opportunity to have the last 2 minutes saved for yourself, so we can move now to the closing statements, and we will begin with Mr. Hubbell. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks to all of you folks for taking your time to be with us today, and to the League for organizing such a wonderful forum. Iowa faces very serious challenges as we look to the future. Our healthcare system is a disaster. Our working families are being disrespected and undercut by strict collective bargaining rights. Our farmers and our entire economy are threatened with tariffs and changes to the renewable fuel standard, which could have billions of dollars of negative impact on our farmers as well as our state's economy. And our education system is underfunded, leaving teachers and schools without the resources that they need to help our kids get the education that they deserve. We are clearly heading towards Kansas. Make no mistake about it. If this governor with their fiscal mismanagement and the Republicans' misguided priorities continue in office, take your choice, Kansas or Oklahoma. Neither one is consistent with Iowa's values and Iowa's quality of life we all have enjoyed for so long. So we need a governor who has the experience to turn this mismanagement around. And I'm not a politician, but I certainly respect all the good work and the commitment that politicians all across our state and up and down the ballots provide to our communities. In fact, I have over 70 current and former elected officials supporting my campaign, including 8 county sheriffs. And they're doing it because they know that I'm committed to doing what it takes to improve the lives of Iowans, and I've got the experience and the leadership skills to deliver those results for people. Governor Reynolds has taken Iowa's budget from almost $1 billion surplus to $144 million in the red by continuing to endorse wasteful corporate giveaways and failing to invest in education and healthcare. That's not how we should be growing our state, and that's not how anybody should be leading our state. As governor, I'm going to expand investments in pre-K, K-12, public schools, and making sure the college is affordable again, but making sure that we have good job training in every corner and every high school across our state. Thank you.
Ms. McGuire.
Well, thank you for having us here, and thank you for your questions. I was thinking about and reflecting on your questions and trying to listen to what you were interested in. It was all about people. It's all about Iowans being successful. One of the things I've talked about in this campaign is every Iowan being able to be the success that he or she can be. When we talk about healthcare, it's sort of the bedrock of being able to do what you need to do. You're certainly not going to be productive in school, in your job, in your life if you don't have good health. We don't have affordable, accessible health care, quality health care everywhere in Iowa. That's not going to have us be successful. You know, we talk about this Medicaid mess. I have the expertise to fix that and make sure that 600,000 Iowans are no longer put at risk to have access to health care. When we talk about mental health, substance abuse, and addiction, it's such an important topic, and we're not giving it the priority it should have. Please go to my website, look at the plan I have to start to address this crisis. I want all of your input because it's something we can do, and as governor, I will make it a priority. We talk about women's health is so important to me. We talk about public education. These are the subjects that you brought up. These are the subjects that you're worried about. This is what I hear all over Iowa, and we need a governor who puts these issues first, and that's not what we have right now. I always say any one of us would be better than the governor we have right now. So people ask me why I'm doing this. Well, I have 7 kids and 1 grandchild. And that's why I'm doing this. I'm doing this for my kids and my grandchildren, for your kids and your grandchildren, to make sure that they can be the success they want to be in Iowa. They can stay right here and have good paying jobs with good benefits everywhere in Iowa. Affordable, accessible, quality health care, fabulous, world-class education, that people move here for our education, and making sure they have clean water and clean air. That's the Iowa I see. That's the governor I want to be. Thank you for your help today.
Mr. Norris.
Thank you so much for being here, your attention, your involvement. There are so many critical issues, and I really want this campaign to be about issues, about our children, about valuing our older Iowans, about protecting our environment, addressing our mental health needs. That I thought this campaign would be all about issues. I figured if it was about it, if experience mattered, we'd have a different president. But it does matter. It does matter when you step into that governor's office on day one. There is going to be so much to do to clean up this Reynolds mess that I have spent my life not planning on running for governor, but in public service. It was 30 years ago I marched with Cedar Rapids for environmental justice for migrant workers in Kirkwood. It was 20 years ago I marched with Paul Wellstone at the battle in Seattle against WTO and its harm on workers and farmers. Serving as Governor Vilsack's chief of staff, we did so much to help government empower people. I've been the head of a state agency. I've run and started 2 small businesses, the head of a federal agency, represented you all at the United Nations. I believe I can start day one, turning this state around. What will guide me every day is what Hubert Humphrey said. The moral test of a government is what that government does for those in the dawn of life, our children. Those in the twilight of life, our elderly. And those in the shadows of life, our sick, our needy, and our disabled. That's what drives me. My life has been driven by fighting for economic and social justice. I will continue to do that as your governor. I would love to have your support.
Thank you. Mr. Wilburn.
I want to thank the League of Women Voters and all of you for showing up here, giving us part of your Saturday. It shows your dedication and your commitment to each other and our state. And thank you for listening to me share a little bit about our Let's Be Iowa campaign, which in part is about a change in the relationship between the governor's office and you, the people of the great state of Iowa. Strengthening rural and urban economies, increasing the minimum wage, protecting our environment, our health, protecting our civil rights. Regardless of which community that you belong here in the state and the rich diversity that we have, it's about creating a welcoming, inclusive state. Diversity and inclusion are important, but it's about creating a sense of belonging and opportunity that's consistent with the Iowa that we know and love. So my name is Ross Wilburn. Please visit us at letsbeiowa.com on Facebook. You won't see me on Snapchat. My daughter told me I might pull a muscle if I did that. But I hope to earn your vote to be the 44th governor of Iowa. So please join with us and together, let's be Iowa. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bolton.
Thank you again for hosting this forum, and thanks to all of you who came out to listen to our ideas and our plan forward for our state. I believe this is a very powerful and important moment for Iowa. I say it every time that I speak. This is a fight for the soul of our state. We're going to determine Iowa's long-term future with the decisions we make here in 2018. And while with many of you I have been proud to stand up to some of the attacks on our very Iowa values, I've been proud to stand up and resist on many occasions, including as we went through 26 consecutive hours of legislative session until they literally shut off my microphone and forced a vote on public sector bargaining rights. I've been proud to stand up to this agenda that's hurt our state. But if we're going to win in 2018, if we're going to see that better path forward, we have to talk about the things we are for, not just what we are against. That's what it's going to take to win this election. Sharing with Iowans what we would do with the same opportunities that this administration has had. Think about what Iowa could look like if we have a plan for the next 20 years, not just the next 20 months. If we get back to doing the things that make us proud to be Iowans. That's what it has to be. And leadership is more than just having ideas. It's about knowing how you're going to get things done, the way to accomplish those things. I've introduced legislation to show that vision forward. What would Iowa look like if we recruit our best and brightest with things like paid family leave, where we lead the nation in something that has bipartisan growing support? Make Iowa a leader on that issue. What if we got back to making sure we have wages growing in this state so our best and brightest can succeed in our communities? If instead of giving away $20 million to the largest corporations, we put $20 million worth of investments in our rural communities, 260 Main Street grants could have been funded with the same thing that they give away to a single company to create 50 jobs. We're going to win this by having a plan for Iowa's future. I believe this is a fight for the soul of our state, and we have to win it so our future generations can be a part of an Iowa that we were proud to build in 2018.
Thank you. And Mr. Battaglia.
Iowa, if you...
Oh, I'm sorry. My goodness, you waited
One
all
more
this
Democrat.
time.
I'll be fast.
Miss Glass.
I like a lot of what Kathy's been bringing up, so I encourage...
Are you yielding the floor?
We don't want to see...
So I also want to thank the League of Women Voters, and Johnson and Lynn particularly for sponsoring us as well. In Iowa in 2018, we have a unique opportunity. If we reject politics as usual, telling us what we can expect, and instead we demand the things that we need, if we stand up together and fight for the things that we all care about, like raising the wage, expanding and strengthening unions, investing in universal health care, public education, and clean water, we will improve the lives of over 1 million Iowans. And we must take up this fight. There isn't any alternative, because Republicans have a stranglehold on government at local, state, and federal levels, which has led to a reality in our state where women can't access reproductive care, where communities can't provide mental health services, where our minorities and LGBTQ communities face discrimination and attacks on their civil liberties every single day, where our young, our elderly, and our sick can't afford the health care that they need. I'm here today to say the time for half measures and incrementalism is over, because it hasn't worked in the past and it won't work now. We're building a bold progressive movement together because we're a party that puts people over profits, people over party, and people over politics. And I invite you to join our bold progressive movement, because it's only going to be won by people just like you in this room. I'm Kathy Glosson. That's why I'm running for governor. It's our time, Iowans. Let's rise up together. Thank you.
And now, Mr. Battaglia.
Thank you. Iowa, well, first I appreciate everyone up here. We've had so far a great cycle, and I think we actually agree on a lot of important things, especially when it comes to mental health and then a lot of things about agriculture. Though, Iowa, if you are looking for a candidate that is staunchly pro-union, staunchly pro-worker, and also staunchly pro-Second Amendment, I am your guy. I'm there for you. I also want to help reverse suicides in the state among medical professionals, farmers, military, youth. This needs to be brought to the forefront. I look at all Iowans and I see, LGBTQ plus people I meet, Black, Spanish, Latino, Mexican, Latino, Italiano, And these individual rights are here for us. Individual liberty is here for all of us. We have a state constitution, a federal constitution, an entire Bill of Rights. And as long as we stand up for that, this covers, all Iowans, and I'm not going to look down upon one group. I'm going to look at the liberties they do have, and they should have. And I encourage everyone here, if you have a question about myself or the Libertarian Party, you can reach me at www.marcoforgovernor.com. Even if you don't want to support it and just have a question, I'm happy to give you some time. Or if you want to talk about a specific issue. I do have to say that I know my son will see this, so I want to say, Luca, I love you, and you make me really proud, and I hope what I'm doing, helps you and your peers and unborn Iowans across the board. In close, that's basically how I would close out. If you're looking for someone that wants all your liberties, all your rights all the time, no matter what skin color you are, what religion you are, I'll be that guy.
Mr. Porter.
Thank you very much for having us. I really appreciate that. Thanks for everyone for coming out here. And thanks to all the other candidates for coming out here. These guys were not afraid to debate, that's for sure. So I do appreciate that, and I appreciate the discussions that we've had over the issues today. One thing, I think we've got to go back to our state motto right here on the flag. Our liberties we prize and our rights we will maintain. The state of Iowa faces a lot of challenges. A lot of challenges impacting a lot of people, whether it be sexual abuse hotlines being cut, sexual abuse of kids not being tested, our budget crisis, stealing from the emergency funds. The emergency funds will no longer be there whenever we do need them because we've used them not giving away corporate welfare. We have sold out the state for big special interests. That needs to change, but we can change that. And one of the ways we do it is by starting to talk about these issues, whether it be that, the budget issues that we have, criminal justice reform, restoring the voting rights to anyone that has, paid for their drive and served their time. Those are important issues that impacts thousands of Iowans not being able to get their cannabis oil, for example. That's something that we need to discuss. We cannot ignore these issues, and we need a governor that's going to be governor for all Iowans. That doesn't matter what religion you are, what skin color you are, where you came from, what your sexual orientation is. We need a governor that's governor for all Iowans. Our liberties we prize and our rights we will maintain. We used to have a great immigration campaign. Brought people from all over the world into this state. And that was because we respected the rights of the individuals. Iowa is Iowa nice. We can get right back to that. We will be a shining example for the rest of the country. I thank you, and I realize I'm the last speaker, so I'm going to shut up now so you guys can get out of here. Thank you very much.